You are watching Now You See TV. This is your host, Jon Pounders, and tonight we have a very interesting show. It's called The Ancient Hebrew Calendar of Enoch and Prophecy, and Zen has done an extensive work on the Enochian calendar. And for those of you who listened last night to Virtual House Church with Rob Skiba, Rob was talking about this for the first, I don't know, what, 30 minutes to an hour, John, of the episode. And so it's something to look into. It's something definitely that I'm interested in. I know John and David all are interested in, and hopefully you guys will be too, because it's important to look into things that may be true. I mean, there's no reason to have it wrong if we don't have to have it wrong. And I'm just interested, and I'm not at the point to where I can say 100% either way yet. And just because I haven't done the research, and I hate to say that, but I haven't. But tonight we're going to be talking about that, so stay tuned for that. Also, I want to let you guys know we had a Hanukkah party, and it was just people from this area that we invited. It wasn't a big Hanukkah get-together that we invited everybody from Now You See TV on. But what we did was, what we're going to do is a Passover. We're going to do a Passover event, and everybody will be invited to it. We'll tell everybody about it, and we'll set up pre-registration and all that stuff. So we'll let you guys know more about it. We're looking for a venue. Hopefully, by the end of next week, we will have a venue so we can start preparing, because this is going to be an interesting time. We're going to have a couple of speakers, and we're going to try to do it as big as possible so we can allow as many people as possible. I know at the Exposing Darkness conference, we ran out of space. We can only allow a certain amount of people in there. At this Hanukkah party, we did it out in my barn. So there was only enough room for there was probably like 50 people there last night, 40, 50 people. So that's about all we could fit in there, and we didn't really, put that out. So I know there'll be at least 400 or 500 people there. But whatever venue you get, we'll tell you the number on it. So make sure you pre-register ahead of time when we do it, because I have a really good feeling that it'll fill up very, very quickly. But we want to get a venue big enough that we don't have to turn anybody down, but we don't know exactly how that's going to look at this point. If you're watching from the YouTube chat, and you would like, or from YouTube, and you would like to join our private chat to ask questions later on in the show, go to the description in the channel, or you can go to nowyoutv.org. But in the description, there's a link that'll take you right to the page where we're watching this video, and where we also have our private chat on there, so you can join us in fellowship with that. Other than that, that's about all I can think of. I know, John, you might have some more announcements, and I just want to welcome, of course, David and John are always, well, John's not always on with Saturdays, but he's joining us tonight. David's always Saturday night. This is David's show on Saturday night. But I want to welcome you guys, obviously, and give you a chance to discuss anything. But like I said, stay tuned, because we're going to be talking about the Ancient Hebrew Calendar of Enoch and Prophecy. So,
well, after last night, the Virtual House Church, you're right, John, Rob, he spent the first 30-40 minutes talking about the calendars and the discussions he was having with his fellowship. And Zen was brought up, and some of the thoughts behind the Enoch calendar. And it said he had it scratching his head. And when I saw that Zen was coming on with David tonight, and the topic is like, okay, I'm going to sit in and listen and learn and see what these gentlemen have come up with, and have a blueprint for me to follow as I start studying this out. So it's an honor to be here on the Midnight Ride with David Carrico, as always. And guess what, David? Looky. I got mine. And thank Miss Donna, because we
got our big man coffee cups for this our Midnight Ride.
Got mine right there. I got that. Well, Donna and David brought me a huge coffee cup, me and John both. And what we did, usually you're supposed to rinse these things out. We just pulled the instructions out, put coffee right in it, and start carrying it around.
You could tell that cup was ordained by God, sanctified and germ-free.
It's awesome too, man. My coffee was like, I poured coffee in it, and like 4 hours later, I sip on it, about burnt my mouth off. So that's an awesome cup there. I mean, it definitely does a job. Thank you so much for that. I wasn't expecting that, so that's amazing.
Well, anyways, fellas, I'm looking forward to diving into this. David, I'm gonna let you take off and start this show off. It's the Midnight Ride with David Carrico and Zen Garcia.
Well, thank you so very much, John and John. You guys are just the best, and Zen is absolutely one of my favorite people, and one of our favorite guests here on Now You See TV. And tonight, I am going to, well, I guess I just better welcome Zen to the show first. We'll be formal here. And for anybody that leads a sheltered life and doesn't know Zen or where to get a hold of him, Zen, tell us where people can go to get a hold of all things Zen.
Well, I sell my books, and you can find my books and my videos. Well, my books at zengarcia.com, my videos under Endeavor Freedom on YouTube, and also Zen Garcia. You can contact me through Facebook, Zen Garcia, and I'm also the webmaster for Fallen Angels TV, which I don't have a whole lot of time to really do. I wish I had more time to do that, but at some point, and I'm also working with Sacred Word Publishing to bring out a lot of books that are out of print that, you know, are of great interest, especially in this time and age. And we re-released the Alex Gleason book on Is the Earth a Globe, and are working on several others. And so it's my honor and my pleasure to be here. I consider you guys to be, you know, one of my most favored churches and ministries, and love the fellowship, and most certainly love the, you know, the listening audience. They're very wise and well researched, and it's good to be among people like that, you know, put forth the effort to really seek the kingdom and to search out the gospel and to learn the secrets contained therein. And so I'm honored to be here.
Well, we're honored to have you, Zen. And I might say for anyone that would like to get a hold of my ministry, you can go to fojcradio.com, and there's a link there to our YouTube channel, and there's a teaching there I did called The Book of Enoch and Wandering Planets that has more information in regard to this subject tonight for those of you that would like to study a little deeper. And I'd also just like to briefly make mention that Monday night at 8 o'clock Central, we're going to have a special show on FOJC with a lady that is a survivor of electronic mind control. Tremendous, compelling testimony. And it's going to be a very, very intense interview. So we're going to begin tonight, and I'm going to set the stage tonight talking a little bit about Enochian cosmology. And I want to read from the book of Enoch, chapter 75 and verse 3, to get an understanding about what the book of Enoch says is going on in the spiritual world, because this is very much going to segue into what Zen is going to talk about concerning the Enochian calendar. And when I read Zen's book of The Flat Earth and the Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, we've talked about this before several times, and this just really pushed me over the edge in regard to the concept of the flat earth, if you will, or the biblical earth model, whatever you might want to call it, getting off the Glober train, I guess you might say. But if you read the book of Enoch, and if you give it any credibility at all, you're going to have to abandon the heliocentric spinning globe model of the universe. But let's just read. I'm just going to briefly here set the stage for Zen to talk about this. And I just have to say that after reading Zen's books and what he read concerning the Enochian calendar, his argument is extremely compelling. And I told Zen, if he's wrong anywhere, I can't figure it out. It's really, really a compelling argument, and very, very good. But in Enoch chapter 75 and verse 3, it says this: "Thus the signs, the duration of time, the years and the days were shown to me by the angel Uriel, whom the Lord God of eternal glory has appointed over all the luminaries in heaven, both in heaven and the world, in order that they, the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the created objects which circulate in all the chariots of heaven, should rule in the face of the sky and be seen on the earth, to be guides for the day and the night." And the book of Enoch teaches an amazing concept, that the heavenly luminaries move because they are being moved by angels. That is, it is the angels moving the heavenly luminaries, the sun, the moon, and the stars, to cause the seasons, sunrise, sunset, and what have you. And in the book of Enoch, chapter 80 and verse 1, it says, in those days, the angel Uriel responded and said to me, behold, I have shown you everything, Enoch, and I have revealed everything to you, so that you might see the sun, this moon, and those that guide the stars of heaven as well, as all those who interchange their activities and their seasons and rotate their processions. And down in verse 6 of Enoch chapter 80, it talks about a future rebellion of these angels that move the stars and the planets, that they are going to rebel and they are going to cause things to go haywire in the heavenly world. Beginning in verse 6, it says, many of the chiefs of the stars shall make errors in respect to the orders given to them. They shall change their courses and functions and not appear during the seasons which have been prescribed for them. All the orders of the stars shall harden in disposition against the sinners and the conscience of those that dwell upon the earth. They, the stars, shall err against them, the sinners, and modify all their courses. And they, the sinners, shall err and take them, the stars, to be gods. And evil things shall be multiplied upon them, and plagues shall come upon them, so as to destroy all. And I believe what Enoch there is prophesying is the same thing that our Lord was talking about in the 21st chapter of Luke, beginning in verse 25. And I believe that these cosmic upheavals that our Lord prophesied here in Luke are going to be the result of of fallen angels rebelling and moving the heavenly luminaries into directions that they shouldn't go. And this is going to cause a whole bunch of trouble. In Luke 21, verse 25, Jesus speaks to this. And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars and upon the earth, distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. And notice Jesus didn't say, don't worry about it, you're going to be out of here before these things happen. But he said, when these things begin to happen, then you look up, because your redemption is drawing nigh. Now, in the book of Ephesians, chapter 6 and verse 12, we're going to read a scripture that we're all familiar with. And I want to zero in upon one word here that's relevant to our study tonight. In Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12, it says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Now, the word rulers of the darkness of this world is a $50 Greek word called cosmocrator. And we want to talk a little bit about the cosmocrators and understand just what they are. And very simply, F.F. Bruce, in his commentary in the book of Ephesians on page 405, speaking to the word cosmocrator, he says the original application of the term world rulers, cosmocrators, appears to have been to the planets. Now, you're not going to pick this up in Strong's or Thayer's, but when you go to more detailed Greek helps like Kittle's Theological Dictionary and in the Complete Biblical Library, it says that cosmocrator is originally an astrological term. And this is what the word means. And it explains that it was only later that it took on other meanings, and that the basic word cosmocrator, we're talking about these heavenly luminaries. And literally what Paul and the Holy Ghost is telling us here is that these planets and these fallen angels that move the planets, that they are the rulers over the darkness of this world. And here we begin to see and understand the way that the hierarchy in the dark kingdom works. The dark kingdom has structure and hierarchy to it, just like the kingdom of God is. And when we begin to understand that these cosmocrators are the rulers of the darkness of this world, we begin to see that there's a satanic conspiracy that is unfolding that is specifically directed to prohibiting God's people from properly observing God's times. And this is what Zen is going to so precisely speak to in just a few moments. Now, to really define what the cosmocrators are, I want to read from the Testament of Solomon. In the Testament of Solomon, it spells it out. And this is a precise rendering of what this Greek word cosmocrator means. In the Testament of Solomon, in verse 2, it says, "When I, Solomon, saw them, I was amazed and asked them, 'Who are you?' They replied, 'We are heavenly bodies, rulers of the darkness of this world.'" And this is translating the word cosmocrator. They're the heavenly bodies. "The first said, 'I am deception.' The second said, 'I am strife.' The third said, 'I am fate.' The fourth said, 'I am distress.' The fifth said, 'I am error.' The sixth said, 'I am power.' The seventh said, 'I am the worst. Our stars in heaven look small, but we are named like gods. We change our position together, and we live together, sometimes in Lydia, sometimes in Olympus, sometimes on the great mountains." And in chapter 18 of the Testament of Solomon, it says, "Then I commanded another demon to appear before me. There came to me 36 heavenly bodies, their heads like formless dogs. But there were among them those who were in the form of humans, or of bulls, or of dragons, with faces like the birds, or the beast, or the sphinx. When I, Solomon, saw these beings, I asked them, saying, 'Well, who are you?' All at once, with one voice, they said, 'We are 36 heavenly bodies, the world rulers of the darkness of this age,'" the cosmocrators, the world rulers of the darkness of this age. And in the godly and also the ungodly understanding of the spiritual world, both understood that these cosmocrators, these heavenly luminaries, which were directed by angels, were the controllers of the spiritual forces in this world. And in Scripture, speaking of the beast that will come, we know that his agenda, and we've talked so much about this lately, how that the beast agenda is all about getting God's people off of God's times and onto the beast times. And in this time of year, we've talked a lot about that. And in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 25, it says of the beast that will come, it says, "And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And there shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of times." And so many times, and the revelations that are coming so fast that the deceptions and the knowledge that's being increased and revealed by God it's just amazing what the Lord is pouring out through so many of God's people that are really studying. And we're here going to take out the secular year of 2016 with a bang, take out the year of 2016 with a bang. And it's amazing, as 2016 began, I believed that I was living in a heliocentric spinning ball world. But as we begin the secular year of 2017, I no longer believe that. And it's been certainly quite a year. And who knows what we're going to see revealed and peeled away in 2017. It's going to be good. And in the book of Jubilees, I want to read beginning with chapter 33. And in this scripture, it speaks to the revelation of the Lord that indeed the fallen ones were going to mess with God's people in regard to deceiving them to the proper times that they were to worship and recognize of being of God, and to get us on to the devil's times. And he's been at that a long time. But beginning in the book of Jubilees, chapter 6 and verse 33, but if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, then they will disturb all their seasons, and the years will be dislodged from this order. And they will disturb the seasons, and the years will be dislodged. And they will neglect their ordinances, and all the children of Israel will forget, and they will go wrong as to all the order of the years. For I know, and from henceforth will I declare it unto thee, and it is not of my own devising, for the book lies written before me, and on the heavenly tablets the division of days is ordained, lest they forget the feast of the covenant and walk according to the feasts of the Gentiles, after their error and after their ignorance. For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons and comes in from year to year 10 days too soon. For this season, the years will come upon them when they will disturb their order and make an abominable day, the day of testimony, and an unclean day, a feast day. And they will confound all the days, the holy with the unclean, and the unclean day with the holy, for they will go wrong as to the months and Sabbaths and feasts and jubilees. And we have this prophecy that this would indeed happen. And we can all agree that this is the plan of the evil one. And we can all agree that modern evangelical Christianity has been totally fooled by turning from the feast of God to the feast of the pagan rites. But I think tonight we're going to look a little deeper into just maybe how much we have been fooled. And we're going to let Brother Zen present information here that's just staggering, in my opinion, that has just really shaken me up. And I think it's going to cause us all to really restudy, and a lot of good study and a lot of good conversation is going to come from this. So, Brother Zen, you just come on and you just give your version of what you believe the evil one has done to sow confusion in this area.
Well, I appreciate you very much, and I'm so very glad that all of you are open to at least introspection of this as topic. Excuse me, because I do absolutely believe that, just as it says in Jubilees, that Satan has most certainly not only paganized the feast days and the festivals, but has also substituted the calendar system and as well as the real cosmology. So this gets very, very deep. And as I wrote about in my 9th book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, it wasn't until I embraced flat Earth, the cosmology surrounding it as an enclosed world system as possibility, that I was then able to apply that as key for unlocking the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries. And when I did so, I decided that I was going to study every aspect of this portion of the text, because even though I had read the book of Enoch numerous times previously, I was never able to comprehend in fullness the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries as it was laid out in those 13 or 14 chapters. And that was because I was trying to understand it with the heliocentric worldview, which again is not possible. And so when I did look at and re-examine all of those passages, all of those chapters, and apply them to what we see reflected in the United Nations flag as the azimuthal equidistant projection map. Well, then I understood that what Enoch was describing for the motions of the sun, the moon, the stars, and the courses of the heavenly luminaries was based upon the earth in a flat circular plane as backdrop for the descriptions of these motions. And when I then applied them to that, everything clicked into place and began to make sense. And so I began a very thorough examination of all of those texts and all of those chapters and all of those verses. And in doing so, I was led to study of the Enochian calendar system because it is thoroughly elaborated upon in this portion of the book. And this was an examination I had never done before. I had never even considered how important this was to, I mean, just as you had read in Jubilees, that when they changed and replaced the calendar system, they would cause a disruption in the observance and the honoring of Sabbath and also the Levitical feast days. And so that's why, in my opinion, this study is so very critical to do. And it is also why in that book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, I spent the first 8 or 9 chapters writing about the calendar system and how we had been deceived. Because in the 10 commandments, the second commandment is for us to not bow down before any other gods and to take no other gods, but to always honor the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and to know the Trinity as God and the Godhead. And in the fourth commandment, we are told to honor the Sabbath. And those, in my opinion, because they are at the very high end of the list, I do believe that there is also precedence associated to how each one of the commandments, where they are placed and why they are placed in certain order. And so I feel like honoring and observing the second and the fourth commandment is a very weighty mandate and one that we should all take seriously. And that if we are being deceived when it comes to the calendar system, and if we are being deceived when it comes to the determination of Sabbath, and also if that disrupts, as it says in Jubilees, the observance of the Levitical feast days, which in my opinion are the 7 holy days that all of us should be observing rather than things like Christmas and Easter and all of these other paganized holy days or holidays.
In there.
Yeah, and that we should still, because Yeshua came to fulfill the law. And also, as I read about in that book, when in his first coming, he actually fulfilled the first 4 Levitical feast days. And with his second coming, he will fulfill the next 3. And what I'm speaking about in specific is that when you study the Exodus and how the Israelites were freed from the bondage of Egypt with the Passover lamb, the striking down of the firstborn of the Egyptians and even their cattle, all of that, all of those feast days as they were laid out and given to the Israelites in memorial observance. And it says in Leviticus that we are to observe this year after year forevermore, that those that follow Torah should be observing and acknowledging the Levitical feast days more so than these paganized holidays. And I write about this in that particular book. Again, because I feel like this is such a very critical issue. And so when you understand that Yeshua did fulfill, he was the Passover lamb, the lamb without spot or blemish that was slaughtered and being crucified. He was crucified on the Feast of Unleavened Bread, entombed, and then resurrected on the Feast for First Fruits. And he was the high priest, which brought up the resurrected dead and offered them as the first fruits to the Most High God, to the Father. And then after 50 days after his resurrection, that's when the Holy Spirit came upon the apostles and filled them, so that when they spoke in knowledge and they spoke in wisdom, they were understood by all of the other tribes and peoples in their own native tongue. And so, again, his first coming, he fulfilled these 4 feasts. And with his second coming, in my opinion, he will fulfill the remaining fall feasts, which are the Feast of Tabernacles, the Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Trumpets. The Feast of Trumpets is the first, of course. And that always occurs on the 1st of Tishri. And so when he comes again, in my opinion, the 7th trumpet, that's when the church will be called up. But that is on the last day, on the great and terrible day of the Lord, when the wrath of God is poured out on the wicked, and those not written into the book of life will be judged and condemned. And then on the festival, the Day of Atonement, he will take the judgment seat, and every knee shall bow and every tongue confess. That's when the harvest will happen. Everybody will be brought before him in judgment. And then those that are found worthy will then enter into New Jerusalem, which will descend out of the heaven, be brought to the earth. And those that are found righteous and worthy, they will be allowed to enter into New Jerusalem for what will be the millennial reign. And so that will be the fulfillment. And so Yeshua did fulfill the feast of the Most High God. He didn't come to change the law. And even though we are under new covenant, we still cannot just throw out the Old Testament, in my opinion. And so when we look at what we're going to be examining tonight, I will show you how it is only by observing and understanding how the Enochian calendar works that you can then maintain observance of Sabbath and determine on what day Sabbath actually occurs, and also how to maintain from year to year, again, as it says in Jubilee 6, observance of the Levitical feast days, because according to God's calendar and the way that it is established and set up according to the workings of the lunar phases, because chodesh and the Sabbath, once you understand, and I'll explain this, the lunar phases determine Sabbath. And we'll go into this here in just a minute, but I want to first explain that it is only by understanding how God's calendar works that we can then, determine and maintain celebration of Levitical feast days, because they occur on the same days every year. And the way that God's calendar is structured is that the Sabbaths fall on the 1st, the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th every lunar month. And those days are always Sabbath, which is why when you study the Levitical feast days, on the 15th of Nisan, we have the celebration, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And that is always a Sabbath that begins that celebration. And for 7 days, we are to celebrate the festival of unleavened bread, of Passover. And so it begins on a Sabbath and ends on a Sabbath. And the 15th and 22nd are always Sabbath. And this is also the same for the fall feast. It begins, the Feast of Tabernacles is a 7-day celebration. It begins on the 15th of Tishri. And for 7 days, it begins on a Sabbath and ends on a Sabbath. And it's only by observing the Enochian lunar calendar that you can maintain that every first, 15th, 22nd, every first, 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th are Sabbaths. And I'll explain how that is set up here in just a minute. But the Gregorian calendar, because it throws all of the months together in 7-day increments and does not recognize or honor Chodesh, which is something that makes God's calendar completely unique from the substitute and replacement calendar that is established by Satan, the Julian and Gregorian solar calendars. You cannot maintain observance of Chodesh or determination of Sabbath because they run all 7 days together. And so how God's calendar is established is that each lunar month is determined by Chodesh, which in the Hebrew means the time of the new moon. And it is, as I will show from several witnesses when we go into determining exactly what Chodesh is, it is the waxing crescent that is almost 7%. Enoch says that it is 1/2 of a 14th portion, meaning that it is a waxing crescent moon, which is 1/7 full, or 7.14% full. And even in Wiki, it speaks about in determining Rosh Chodesh that it is the day after. Actually, I can pull it up here, but it speaks about how it is the day after the waxing crescent when it first makes appearance, that is when Rosh Chodesh actually aligns up. And so when you understand that Rosh Chodesh, and there's a distinction, because in science calls the new moon what is actually the lunar conjunction moon. And God's definition of new moon and science's definition of new moon are dissimilar, and this is a very important part. And I believe that this was done on purpose in order to keep people that are wanting to actually acknowledge and to honor the Enochian calendar still confused, and to cause confusion and to mix up the days. And so again, what science calls the new moon is actually the dark moon, the conjunctive moon, the lunar conjunction, which on God's calendar is the 5th Sabbath and the last phase of the lunar calendar. And that's very important to understand. God's definition of the new moon is a waxing crescent moon. And I'll go into some of these definitions here in just a minute, but I just want to explain the structure of the calendar, and then just ask you if it's clear how I am explaining this before we move forward, because it's important to understand this. And so God's calendar is based on the lunar phases of the moon, and because the moon has an average cycle of 29.531 days, it takes 29.531 days. This is called the synodic month. It takes this amount of days average for it to cycle through its full 4 phases, going from completely empty, which is the completely void of light, which is the lunar conjunction, to being full, which is full moon, and then back to lunar conjunction. And so that's called a synodic month. And as I said, it averages 29.531 days. And so the way that God's calendar maintains balance with that is it cycles between 29 and 30-day months. So on one month, you will have a lunar month of 29 days, which begins with chodesh. That's that waxing crescent moon, which is 7% full. This will be the first day and Sabbath of the lunar month. This day is excluded from the four 7-day sabbatical weeks. And this is important to understand, that on God's calendar, the lunar chodesh is always excluded from the next 4 7-day sabbatical weekly count. And so you have chodesh, and then after that, you have 6 working days, and then on the 7th day is a Sabbath. So that would be the 8th day of the lunar month. And that Sabbath is the second Sabbath, and it aligns with the first quarter moon. Then you have 7 more days, and on the 15th, always on the 15th, that is the full moon Sabbath, and that is the 3rd Sabbath of the lunar month. And then on the 22nd, you have the 3rd quarter moon and the 4th Sabbath, and then in 7 more days, you have the lunar conjunction, which is the dark moon, and that is the 5th Sabbath. And what is also interesting and confusing for a lot of people that observe Sabbath every 7 days is that Chodesh and sometimes the conjunctive moon, those Sabbaths will be back to back. So the lunar conjunctions, it happens on the 29th. Sometimes every other month, there will be what is called a translation day. And that day will be in between the 5th Sabbath, which is the lunar conjunction moon, and also the beginning of the month Chodesh and what is the new moon Sabbath. That is the first day and the Sabbath of the lunar month. That will happen on either the very day after the conjunctive moon, or there will be the 30th day, the translation day, and then you have Chodesh. And so this can get, it can cause confusion to people, because the Israelites, they did observe Chodesh as Sabbath, but it wasn't like the other. It was given a little more bearing because it was the first day of the lunar month. So it was slightly different from the other 4 7-day sabbatical Sabbaths, but it was called, it was still honored in new moon celebration. And I can, I'll pull up a couple of verses which speak about that, but I want to read one passage before we go into that. I'll share a couple of passages to speak about this. In First Chronicles chapter 23 in verse 31, it says, "And to offer all burnt sacrifices unto the Lord in the Sabbaths, in the new moons, and on the set feasts, by number, according to the order commanded unto them, continually before the Lord." And so when you look up in the Hebrew, the word for new moons is Chodesh, and the word for set feasts is Moed, or Moedim. Moed means an appointment, a fixed time or season, specifically a festival, conventionally a year, by implication an assembly. Technically the congregation, by extension the place of meeting, also a signal as appointed beforehand, an appointed sign, time, place of solemn assembly, congregation, set solemn feast appointed, due season. And so when it speaks about these set feasts, it's actually referring to those Levitical 23 feast days. There's a, and you had read, David, how in Daniel chapter 7 in verse 25, it speaks about how he said, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until the time and times and the dividing of times.
Amen.
So both Daniel and, I'm not going to read all that from Jubilees chapter 6, but it's very important that people study that, because it says, I'll just read this one portion. For this reason, the years will come upon them when they will disturb the order and make an abominable day the day of testimony. This is Sunday, you know, because they changed the Sabbath to a Sunday. But whether you honor Sabbath on Sunday or Saturday, or from Friday from sundown to Saturday at sundown, all of those are wrong according to this calendar system, and I'll explain why here in just a minute. But continuing with this quote, the day of testimony, they will and make an abominable day the day of testimony, and an unclean day a feast day, and they will confound all the days, the holy with the unclean, and the unclean day with the holy, for they will go wrong as to the months and Sabbaths and feasts and jubilees. This happened when they forced the Hebrew people, the Israelites, to accept the Julian and the Gregorian calendar system, the solar-based calendar system. Because as I said, God's calendar has exclusion and gives importance to Chodesh, whereas the Julian and Gregorian calendars do not. And the weeks, according to the Julian and Gregorian solar calendar system, are run back to back to back to back. There's never any recognition or acknowledgement of Chodesh. And also, they have confounded the way that the months are established. Like February has 28 days, sometimes 29 days. Some months have 30 days. Some months have 31 days. In God's calendar, every month has either 29 or 30 days. There are no months that have less than that or are more than that. And so, here's another passage from Numbers chapter 10. It says, also in the day of your gladness and in your solemn days. That word solemn days, that's the same thing as in First Chronicles that speaks about the set apart days, the established days. Those are the Moedim, the Levitical feast days. And in the beginnings of your months, that word months is Chodesh. Again, so we see that Chodesh and the appointed times are being recognized in all of these verses about honoring the Most High God on his specific months and appointed times. So the full quote is, also in the day of your gladness, and he's given this to Moses. He's telling him when he wants him to honor and celebrate him. Also in the day of your gladness and in your solemn days and in the beginnings of your months, ye shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, that they may be to you for a memorial before your God. I am the Lord your God. In Psalms 81, verse 3, it says, blow the trumpet at the time of the new moon, at the full moon, on our solemn feast day, for this is a statute for Israel, a law of the God of Jacob. And so now I'm going to explain what Chodesh is. But before I do that, I want to read a passage about it. This is a quote from my book. It was put out in a book called The Destruction of Sabbath, written by one of my friends, Christopher Tyerman. He says this about the changing and the destruction of Sabbath. What few Jews and even less Sabbatarians know is during the AD 4th century, persecution of all who used the original Hebrew lunar-based calendar for worship was so intense that in the end, the Jews gave up their calendar handed down from the text of the creation through to Moses, and instead adopted a calendar adjusted for worship based on the solar-centered Julian calendar. If asked, the Jewish leadership is very open to their original calendar was set aside under the intense Roman persecution of all who used the Hebrew calendar in the AD 4th century. Under the reign of Constantinus, the persecutions of the Jews reached such a height that the computation of the calendar was forbidden under the pain of severe punishment. The new moon is still, and the Sabbath originally was, dependent upon the lunar cycle. Originally, the new moon was celebrated in the same way as Sabbath. Gradually, it became less important, while the Sabbath became more and more a day of religion and humanity, of religious meditation and instruction, of peace and delight of the soul. That's from the Jewish Encyclopedia on Holidays. Just a couple more verses here. With the development of the importance of the Sabbath as a day of consecration and the emphasis laid upon the significant number 7, the week became more and more divorced from its lunar connection. That is also from the Universal Jewish Encyclopedia on the term week. Last portion on the destruction of Sabbath. It is easy to see how such a tradition could be used to justify changing the calendar due to the extreme persecution facing all who worship by the lunar-based Hebrew calendar. Using his authority as president of the Sanhedrin, it is assumed that Hillel II tied the annual feast to the spring equinox. Next, he adjusted the weekly seventh-day Sabbath to the Julian seventh-day Saturday. This freed the Jews from the condemnation of the law, since they no longer knew when the true Sabbath occurred. Thus, they justified their use of the pagan calendar. Now, I would also interject here that this is when the Essenes, the individuals that separated themselves in Qumran, if you study all the fragments and all the texts that were found there, there were many, many fragments where they were trying to maintain observance of the Hebrew, the Enochian lunar-based calendar, and they were trying to line it up with the Julian and Gregorian solar-based calendar so that they could maintain honoring Sabbath and also in observing the Levitical feast days. And this is exactly what I've done with that calendar that I sent to you guys earlier this evening, and which, if you'll share that link, I did make a calendar where I adjusted according to the Gregorian, the one that we're used to using and hanging on our wall. I applied and showed exactly how the Enochian calendar falls and when the Kodeshes happen, when the Sabbaths happen, when the feast days happen, according to the Gregorian calendar, which is the one that we are used to. Like, for instance, and it's actually a huge blessing that we're doing this show this evening, because tonight, if you go out and, well, if you would have went out earlier and you would have looked at the moon, you would recognize that tonight is the Kodesh. It is actually the first day and the Sabbath of the lunar month of Tibet. And I'm gonna send you a link, John, for people to look at this as well. And for if those that want to determine this for themselves, all you have to do is pull up a lunar calendar that has the percentages of the moon, and you will see that tonight the moon actually, hold on.
Hey, Zen, if you put the link in the Google chat, I'll put it in the Not Used to TV chat room for them.
Okay, I'll do that.
You sent it to us on a messenger as well, right, Zen? So is that the one you want us to put out?
Yeah, that's the link for the calendar, but I'm actually giving you where you can find the lunar percentages. For those that want to look this, you can look at this. It's a map of the month, but you'll see that on December 31st, this evening, it shows you that the moon reached 6%. And so again, according to Enoch and Philo, this is when chodesh actually happens. And I'm going to go into those definitions now, because Enoch determines that chodesh is when the moon reaches 1/2 of a 14th portion, or 1/7%, which is again 7% full. And so you see that today it began it was 6% at the beginning of the day, and so it's on this day that it reaches that 7% fullness. So today is chodesh, and so this is the first day and Sabbath of the lunar month of Tibet. And I have that, like, if you open the calendar that I sent you, you'll see that January 1st will be the second of Tibet. And then in 5 more days, you have on that Enochian calendar, on the what is Saturday, on this will be the second Sabbath. It will be the first quarter moon, the 8th of Tibet. And that will be this next Saturday. And so that will be the second Sabbath. And so for this month, Sabbath will actually fall on Saturday. But next month, because you will have Rosh Chodesh on the 29th of January. And then that is the first day and Sabbath of the month of Shavat. And then you have the next month, you have Sabbath actually falling on Sunday. So the Christians will actually be right for the whole month of February. And then you have on the 28th of February is the first day and Sabbath of the month of Adar, which is the last month of the Hebrew year. And then you have on the Sabbaths actually fallen in March on Tuesday. And so you see how they float. They change every month, because on God's calendar, the Chodesh is excluded from the following 4 7-day sabbatical weeks. And so you have to recognize that exclusion, and how it is that Chodesh actually determines the following 4 sabbatical weeks. Does that make sense to you guys? It might be hard without looking at the actual calendar, because I know that it's difficult to try to wrap your mind around it without actually seeing how the months are laid out. But in my 9th book, I show how the months are broken down, each one according to the day, because you'll see there's Then
real quick, do you have a picture that I can post on here so people can look at it? Picture of it, like a JPEG?
Yes,
okay.
I do.
Real quick, then I can post it up. That way it'll make it a little bit easier for people to understand.
Okay, yeah, let me find a picture.
Zen, I think you are doing a real good job explaining it. It's just kind of hard to get our mind going the right way. And I believe that, it's more than just in a letter sense getting this right. If a month ago I never even considered this, so I would have been in big trouble. And I believe the Lord will honor us when we try to obey according to the light we have. But I think there's spiritual things that are very important at play here, because in Ezekiel 46, it talks about how that on the new moon and on the feast days, that gates open in the heavenly temple. And Ezekiel 40 through 48, it is nowhere stated it's a millennial temple, but Ezekiel is caught up into heaven, into the heavenly temple. And in Ezekiel 46 and 1, it says, "Thus saith the Lord God, the gate of the inner court that looketh toward the east shall be shut in the 6 working days, but on the Sabbath it shall be opened, and in the day of the new moon it shall be opened." There are gates open in the heavenly realm for God's people and for blessing at God's specific times. And in verse 9, it says, "But when the people of the land shall come before the Lord in the solemn feast, he that entereth in by the way of the north gate to worship shall go out by the way of the south gate. He that entereth by the way of the south gate shall go forth by the way of the north gate. He shall not return by the way of the gate whereby he came out, but he shall go forth over against it." And we're talking about things that affect how things operate in the spiritual world. And when God's people honor God's times in the way that he says, with prayer and seeking God, there are spiritual advantages, if you will, of blessings coming to God's people because of gates that are literally open in the heavenly temple. And I think this is a really important spiritual dynamic to this that is so important. And I think this is something that the devil doesn't want us to get.
Absolutely.
Can I jump in here real quick? Because I've got a question that keeps rolling in my head, and I know you're probably familiar with it. Exodus 20, 8 through 11. Exodus 20, where Yahweh himself says, he's in Moses' editing as he's writing, he says, "Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of Yahweh thy God. In it thou shalt not work any, for in 6 days Yahweh made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. Wherever Yahweh blesses the Sabbath day and hallow it." So on the Enochian calendar, this 7th day continues to move.
No, the seventh day, it's only Chodesh that moves. Chodesh is the time of the new moon. The 7th day Sabbath, those are set according to Chodesh.
You said, okay, the Chodesh part, I'm trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah, I'm gonna go into further explanation on that right now. But yeah, no, that's a very good question. But no, it is the 7th day. And as I said, on God's calendar, when you understand this, every lunar month has 4 7-day sabbatical weeks. And those 4 7 days are these 4 Sabbaths, the 7-day, the weekly Sabbaths. And so let me explain Chodesh a little further, and then I'll revisit you, and then you can tell me if it makes more sense. So I'm going to explain. I'm going to read one other quote again about the Chodesh, and then I'm going to lay out exactly what it is. And John, you did receive that image? I sent it on Facebook.
I didn't see an image. I saw a link, and I got a link for it. And this is the link that it popped up when I clicked on it. Is there an image you want me to have? This is what I had. And if you...
Yeah, it shows that I sent the image. Like when I click on it, oh wait, no, okay. All right, let me reattach it just to make sure. Yeah, I see what you're saying. But okay, so let me attach this image again, and then I will explain the Chodesh. But John, did you or anybody else have a comment while I'm putting this up there for you?
I'm ready for the explanation.
Okay, let me post this image, because it will make it a lot easier for you to determine and to understand what I'm talking about when you can see how it breaks down. All right, here it is.
Well, and I'm letting you know, Zen, I'm not having a knee-jerk reaction to this, because it's just another rabbit hole to go down and information to take in. And a lot of times, you'll get that knee jerk reaction, like as you're hitting a speed bag, and all of a sudden by a lot of questions. But, you know, to listen to where you're coming from helps everyone be able to study this out for themselves. So, you know, when I ask that question, is like, okay, but the first thing that comes to my mind is Exodus and what Yahweh says about it. It's on the seventh day. How
Yes.
can it move? So, and you know, I bet you get a lot of knee-jerk reactions and, well, what about this, this, and this? I'm
Right.
just waiting for the explanation. So don't take your time, bro. I'm
No
hanging tough.
Okay, good. And we're actually going to go to Exodus after I explain Kadesh, because it's in Exodus that you will see that it's only by applying what happened in Exodus to this calendar system that you can make sense of what is laid out there. John, did you get that image?
Yeah, can you guys see it now? I mean,
You do see it?
Do you see it? Can you guys? The best I could pull it up. That's a close.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
You can see it.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, just to explain again, if you look at that image that John posted, you will see that the Kadesh is separated and excluded every month. It's all by itself, number one, at the very top of all those lunar months. And then you have the following 4 sabbatical weeks. And so I'm going to go into explanation on that. And then we'll go to Exodus, because that's very important for this study this evening. And I want to be sure we get there on that. It says this: for those who use the scriptural Hebrew calendar, calculation is very simple. The weekdays, Sabbaths, and the new moon Sabbath of each lunar month always fall on the exact same dates of each Hebrew month. This explains why whenever the date of a 7th-day Sabbath is given in the Hebrew scripture, it always falls on the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, or the 29th of the Hebrew month. The days of the week do not float through the monthly dates as they do now on the modern Gregorian calendar. After Hillel II fixed the calendar to fit into a Julian framework and moved the observance of the 7th-day Sabbath from the lunar week to the continuously cycling Julian week, difficulties arose. The new moon would cycle through the Julian days of the week, which caused the annual feast to fall on the wrong times of the month. As a result, rules of postponement were established. Something that was unnecessary with the scriptural Hebrew calendar became necessary with the inefficient and ever-changing Julian solar calendar. Those who desire to worship on the true 7th-day Sabbath should not look to modern calendation efforts. All who worship on Saturday because the Jews keep Saturday are not following the scriptural Hebrew Sabbath, but the Fox Sabbath that Hillel's corruption of the original calendation fashion. This corruption of the correct day thus channeled the whole of the Jewish people into breaking one of the Hebrew scripture's most important decrees and caused them to lose track of the new moon Sabbath of each month, the destruction of Sabbath. All right, now I'm going to go into the explanation of what Kadesh is. And I'm going to explain this from 3 witnesses. The first one is a passage from the Wisdom of Jesus, son of Sirach, which is part of the apocryphal text, which used to be part of the original 80-book canon of the King James Version of the Bible before the Catholics, before they separated. I forget who separated them, but they took out 13, 14 books from the original 80-book canon, and they called those the Apocrypha. This is one of those books. It says this: on the splendor of the moon. It is the moon that marks the changing seasons, governing the times, their everlasting sign. From the moon comes the sign for festal days, a light that wanes when it completes its course. The new moon, as its name suggests, renews itself. How marvelous it is in this change, a beacon to the hosts on high, shining in the vault of heavens. So you see that it in this passage, it is speaking about the new moon as being a moon that renews itself. Because
what is that citation, Zen?
What, we'll say that again, dude?
What is that address on that citation in Sirach?
chapter 43, verse 6 through 8 on the splendor of the moon. And
Thank
this
you.
is important because a lot of people that are following the Enochian calendar, they actually believe that Chodesh is determined by the full moon, which, again, in my opinion, it is not. And I'm showing 3 witnesses as to why. Because even the word for Chodesh itself, when you look up the word in the Strong's Concordance, it comes from a verb, kadash, chadash, which means to renew, to be new, to rebuild, or to repair. And so the kadesh, which is the time of the new moon, is actually tied to the waxing crescent moon, which is beginning to renew itself, rebuild itself, to be new, or to repair itself. Very important, this determination. Now I'm going to go into Philo here. Philo says, and you can find this Special Laws 2.4. It says this: the third festival is the new moon, which follows the conjunction of the moon with the sun. Now, a lot of people also, and I'm not going to name names, but there are others out there that believe that the new moon is the conjunction moon. And that also is false. The new moon is a waxing crescent, which is 1/7 portion, or 7% full. And Philo here just made the distinction between the conjunction moon and the new moon when he said the third festival is the new moon, which follows the conjunction of the moon. So according to Philo, the conjunctive moon is not Chodesh. It is the waxing crescent which follows the conjunctive moon. As I said, God's calendar, the conjunction moon is the 5th Sabbath and the last Sabbath on the lunar month. And the Chodesh is the waxing crescent, which is the first day and lunar Sabbath of each, the Sabbath of each lunar month. All right.
You please repeat that citation from Philo, please.
Special Laws 2.4.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And this next one is Special Laws 2.14. And it says this: the first thing he says is that the new moon is the beginning of the lunar month, namely the period between one conjunction and the next. So we see that, the new moon and the conjunctive moon are completely different. Now I'm going to read something from Enoch. Oh, wait, there's one other passage from Philo. This is an explanation also of what Philo says. And, oh, okay. All right. Philo has already explained to us that the new moon, remember, the new moon is a day that follows the conjunction of the moon with the sun. This lets us know that the new moon beginning in both number and time begins after conjunction when a new day begins. This day is the beginning in both number and time of the new month. He says that while at conjunction, when the moon is lost in sight under the sun, the side which faces the earth is darkened. When the new moon begins, it resumes its natural brightness. So again, that passage from Special Laws 2.14 says that the new moon is when it resumes its natural brightness. So Philo agrees with me that it is not the conjunction moon, which is Chodesh, but a waxing crescent when it's beginning to rebuild, renew itself, as I said in those particular verses. Now from Enoch, real quick. And if you guys have a question at any time, just jump in. But there's 2 places in Enoch, chapter 72. I'm going to begin with verse 5, and also chapter 77. Chapter 72, verse 5 through verse 10. It says this: At that time, it appears and becomes to you the beginning of the month. So this is the beginning of the month, according to Enoch. And he's going to go into the description of how the moon changes. But I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to just read quickly the specificity of what it is. He says that, and on the whole of its orb, it is void of light. This is the conjunction moon, except a seventh portion out of the 14 portions of its light. This is verse 72.6, 72 chapter verse 6. And so Enoch is telling you that when the moon is completely void of its light, except that it has a seventh portion out of the 14 portions of its light, that is the beginning of the month. That's the waxing crescent. And he says in verse 72.9, but it rises on that day with 1/7 portion precisely, and in its progress declines from the rising of the sun. So he's actually describing that the day after, because when it's on a conjunctive moon, the dark moon, that moon rises, moves across the sky, and sets with the sun, which is why we never see it, and it's completely black. That's called the conjunctive moon. The very next day, when it moves away from the sun, Enoch says it progresses. In its progress, it declines from the rising of the sun. It then becomes apparent. It becomes visible as a waxing crescent. He says, on the day that it has 1/7 portion, that is the new moon. This is the beginning of the month. I'm going to go to one other. And so specifically in chapter 72, verse 6 and 9, and chapter 77, verse 5, Enoch is telling us that the chodesh is a waxing crescent which shining by at least a half of a seventh portion of light, which equals 0.07142857142857114. It's amazing how that number repeats. But anyways, about 7% of fullness. Now I'm going to read really quick because I want to get into Exodus. I'm going to just skip down to 77, verse 14. And when it is wholly extinguished, its light is consumed in heaven. And on the first day, it is called the new moon, for on that day, light is received into it. So Enoch is telling you the same thing as what Philo and I told you, that it is after the lunar conjunction, on the first day that it has light within it, a seventh portion, which is almost 7% full, that this is when chodesh actually happens. And so those are your four witnesses for when chodesh actually occurs. And if you read the full chapter 77, it also tells you about how the Enochian calendar is set up. It will tell you about the how it alternates between 29 and 30 days, and which is exactly what I explained as far as the Enochian calendar and how it is all set up. One other thing really quick from Wikipedia. It says Rosh Chodesh, which is the beginning of the month, is the day after a new moon at 1800 hours Jerusalem time. So they're telling you also that after the conjunctive moon, when the moon first makes appearance, that day is called a young moon. That day is not determined as Chodesh because it is not 7% full. It is often less than that. And that day is actually referenced as translation day, which is a day in between the conjunctive moon and the Chodesh, which is, again, the 7% waxing crescent moon. Now we're going to go into Exodus, because I'm going to show you by Exodus that this is when the calendar was restored to Israel. And I'm also going to explain how Sabbath is actually only celebrated from dawn to dusk. It is only when the sun is up. Because I know most people celebrate it from the evening to the evening of the next day. But I'll show you by Exodus how actually Sabbath is only celebrated from dawn to dusk. All right, and so we're going to go into this. If you want to follow along, go to Exodus chapter 12. In verse number 2, it says, "This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you." So here, the Most High is establishing that the month of Nisan, or called Abib here, that this is the first month of the year, not like January, where we begin our calendar in the middle of winter now. That in God's calendar, it progresses with spring, summer, fall, and winter, the way a year should, basically line up. And so God is telling them that you begin the year in the spring, not in the fall, in the winter, as we do on the Julian and Gregorian solar calendar. All right, now let's set this up. Going to verse 8. This is the night of the Passover. "And they shall eat the flesh in that night." So we're talking about after the slaughter of the Passover lamb, they put the blood on the doorpost, and then they are going to feast on the meat and celebrate during the night, because it's going to be that night at midnight when the angel will go out and slaughter all the firstborn. And you'll also notice that it's after the slaughter of the firstborn of the Egyptians that Pharaoh summons Moses, and then Moses goes there early in the morning and speaks with Pharaoh, and Pharaoh tells him that you can leave that day, but they will not leave in the morning. They won't leave until after the Sabbath, which happens at dusk. So let's read. "They shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Eat not of it raw, nor sodden of it at all with water, but roast with fire his head with his legs and with his pertinence thereof. And ye shall let nothing of it remain until the morning, and that which remaineth of it until the morning ye shall burn with fire. And thus shall you eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on." So he's telling them to be ready to go, because after he slaughters the firstborn, Pharaoh's going to let them go. He says, so with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord, and the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. So now we're going to the 15th of Nisan, which is the Sabbath, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. He says this, picking up in verse 14. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and you shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. It doesn't say until Christ comes, until we establish a new covenant. It says forever, throughout all your generations. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses. For whosoever eateth leavened bread from the first day until the seventh day, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. So here he's establishing the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 days. It's a 7-day festival. It begins on the Sabbath on the 15th and ends on the Sabbath. the 15th of Nisan to the 22nd of Nisan. And in the first day there shall be an holy convocation, and in the 7th day there shall be an holy convocation. So he's telling you the first day, the 15th, and the 7th day, the 22nd, are a holy convocation. Those are always Sabbath, which does not occur on the Gregorian solar calendar. It's only when you observe the Enochian lunar calendar that every 15th and every 22nd is a Sabbath. Excuse me. All right, continuing. No manner of work shall be done in them, save that which every man must eat, that only may be done of you. And ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. For in this selfsame day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. So it's going to be on the 15th, on the Sabbath, after the Sabbath, again, because Sabbath is from dawn to dusk. But at night, after Sabbath, you'll see that that's when they leave. And it's amazing, too, because the 15th is a full moon Sabbath. So what better night for them to have the Exodus than on the full moon? All right, continuing. Therefore shall ye observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. Again, not till Jesus comes, not till Christ comes and we establish a new covenant, but forever. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at even, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 1 and the 20th day of the month at evening time. 7 days shall there be no leaven found in your houses, for whosoever eateth that which is leavened, even that soul shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel. I'm going to skip to verse 21. Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said unto them, draw out and take you a lamb according to your families, and kill the Passover. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the 2 side posts with the blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out at the door of his house until the morning. And so this is still on the 14th. They're about to have the Passover meal. For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians, and when he seeth the blood upon the lintel and on the 2 posts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come unto your house to smite you. And you shall observe this thing for an ordinance to thee and to thy sons forever. And it shall come to pass when you come to the land which the Lord will give you, according as he hath promised, that ye shall keep this service. All right, now we're going to skip to verse 29. This is midnight on the 14th, Passover. It says this. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all of the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. And he called for Moses and Aaron by night, and said, rise up and get you forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go and serve the Lord as ye have said. Also take your flocks and your herds, as ye have said, and be gone, and bless me also. All right, so you see, at midnight, the Lord, the angel of death, comes in, strikes down all the firstborn. After midnight, Pharaoh summons Moses. So Moses goes in the early morning to Pharaoh. Pharaoh tells him, go, leave, go worship your God. So after midnight, sometime in the early morning before dawn, this was before dawn, because again, dawn is when Sabbath occurs, and I'll confirm this. Pharaoh tells Moses and the Israelites to leave Egypt on the 15th of Nisan. From dawn to dusk, they celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And then that night after sunset, this is when they leave the land of Egypt on what is called the full moon night, the 15th, which is the third Sabbath of the lunar month. All right, verse 41. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the selfsame day, it came to pass that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It is a night. It is a night to be much observed unto the Lord for bringing them out from the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord to be observed of all the children of Israel in their generation. So here, this passage, these two passages are telling you that it's on the 15th after sunset, that night on the full moon, that the Israelites walk out of Egypt. Going to Exodus chapter 13, the unleavened bread, picking up on verse 3. And Moses said unto the people, remember this day in which you came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten. This day came you out in the month of Abib. And it shall be when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he sware unto the fathers, give thee a land flowing with milk and honey, that thou shalt keep this service in this month. 7 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and in the seventh day shall be a feast to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and there shall no leavened bread be seen with thee, neither shall they be leaven seen with thee in all thy quarters. All right, now I'm going to prove to you from several verses that the Sabbath is celebrated from dawn to dusk. I'm going to read a couple passages from the Gospel of Peter. Verse 5, it says this. Herod said, Brother Pilate, even if no one had asked for him, we would have buried him, since the Sabbath is dawning. Okay, so Sabbath begins at dawn. For it is written in the law that the sun must not set on one who has been killed. And he delivered him over to the people the day before the feast of unleavened bread. So here, Sabbath begins at dawn, all right?
I got a quick question.
Sure.
So the Messiah was crucified. They had to bury him before sunset, because after sundown, it would be a high day Sabbath, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and no manner of work except for, the preparation of food. So how do we explain that? Because they had to bury him before sunset.
Yeah, it just said right there, for it is written in the law that the sun must not set on one who has been killed. So that it has to do with Sabbath, but it's in the law. Sabbath begins at dawn. Whatever the law is, I don't know. But it says that it is written in the law that the sun must not set on one who has been killed. So whatever that law is, I don't know. All right. Going to verse 34 in the Acts of Peter. It says this. Early in the morning, as the Sabbath dawned, a crowd came from Jerusalem and the surrounding area to see the sealed crypt. So early in the morning, as the Sabbath dawned. So it's speaking about, Sabbath being connected to dawn and celebrated to dusk, because again, it was after the Feast of Unleavened Bread, after sunset, that the Israelites were allowed to leave Egypt. All right, one more as far as the timing of Sabbath. This is from it's a book called And It Came to Pass, The Legends and Stories of King David and King Solomon. It says this about the death of David. One moment the face of the king in his hoary majesty still reflected the glow of the setting sun at the ending of the Sabbath with rich and abiding glory. Then suddenly the sun kissed his mouth with a farewell kiss, and the lips of the sweet singer grew dumb forever amid the sweet scented flowers. And so you have two passages which speak about Sabbath beginning with dawn, and then in this verse it says that Sabbath ends with the setting sun. One other passage also from the same, the on the death of David. It says this, and at the close of every Sabbath, when the men of Israel sit down to eat bread and bid farewell to the prince's Sabbath, then is his food holy to the name in memory of King David. To this day, it is the meal of David, the anointed king. And so they eat at sunset, and that's also at the close of Sabbath. Now, there's one other thing I need to get through just to tie this all up, and then we can take questions, and I'll also answer any comments that y'all have. And this is going to Exodus chapter 16. This is on the quail and the manna. All right. Verse 1, it says, and they took their journey from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came unto the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departing out of the land of Egypt. So they arrived the very next month on the 15th day, which is a Sabbath. So it's important to understand that. And I'll explain why. And the whole of the congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said unto them, would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to the full. For ye have brought us forth into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Verse 4. Then said the Lord unto Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I might prove them whether they will walk in my law or no. And it shall come to pass that on the 6th day they shall prepare that which they bring in, and it shall be twice as much as they gather daily. And so I'm going to show you that. Remember, they came in on the 15th day. It's a Sabbath. He's going to first feed them with quail, but he's going to wait till the Sabbath is finished. At that evening, in that evening, when Sabbath is over at sunset, he's going to send to them the quail. And then on the very next day, when the morning dew, that's when they will start being fed by the manna. And it will be for 6 days. And on the 6th day, they will get a double portion, because on the 7th day, that is Sabbath, and the Lord God will not send them manna on the 7th day. And again, it's only when you understand that the Most High had given them this Enochian calendar, and that Chodesh establishes the following 4 7-day sabbatical weeks, that Sabbath actually falls on every 15th, every 22nd, every 29th, every 1st, and every 8th, which, you know, again, these, the Exodus, and also the fact that they entered into the land, the promised land, on the 15th, the very next month, that was also a Sabbath. And I'm going to prove that right now. Excuse me. Going into verse 6. And Moses and Aaron said unto all the children of Israel, at even, then you shall know that the Lord hath brought you out from the land of Egypt. And in the morning, then you shall see the glory of the Lord, for that he heareth your murmurings against the Lord. And what are we, that ye murmur against us? So he's telling, Aaron and Moses are telling them, the Most High is going to send you a miracle at evening time. Just be patient. And Moses said, this shall be when the Lord shall give you in the evening flesh to eat, and in the morning bread to the full. For that the Lord heareth your murmurings which ye murmur against him. And what are we? Your murmurings are not against us, but against the Lord. And Moses spake unto Aaron, saying unto all the congregation of the children of Israel, come near before the Lord, for he hath heard your murmurings. And it came to pass, as Aaron spake unto the whole congregation of the children of Israel, that they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel. Speak unto them, saying, at evening time, ye shall eat flesh, and in the morning ye shall be filled with bread, and ye shall know that I am the Lord your God. Verse 13. And it came to pass that at evening time, at sunset, the quails came up and covered the camp. And in the morning the dew lay round about the host. And when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, upon the face of the wilderness they lay a small round thing, as small as the hoarfrost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, it is manna, for they wist not what it was. And Moses said unto them, this is the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat. Just a little bit more. This is the thing which the Lord hath commanded. Gather of it every man according to his eating, and omer for every man according to the number of your persons. Take ye every man for them which are in his tents. And the children of Israel did so, gathered some more, some less. And when they did meet it with an omer, he that gathered much had nothing over, and he that gathered little had no lack. They gathered every man according to his eating. And Moses said, let no man leave of it till the morning. Notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto Moses, but some of them left of it until the morning, and it bred worms and stank. And Moses was wroth with them, and they gathered it every morning, every man according to his eating. And when the sun waxed hot, it melted. So it's only on when they gathered more than they should have that the worms came. But you'll see that on the sixth day, when they gathered the double proportion, because the very next day was Sabbath, none of the worms appeared. That's because the sixth day is the day before Sabbath. And every seventh day after following the 15th, as I said, is a Sabbath. Verse 22. And I'm almost done here, and then we'll take your questions. And it came to pass that on the sixth day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for one man, and all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moses. And he said unto him, this is that which the Lord hath said. Tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake that which ye will bake today, and seethe that ye will seethe, and that which remaineth over lay up for you to be kept until the morning. And they laid it up till the morning as Moses bade, and it did not stink, neither was there any worm therein. And Moses said, eat that today, for today is a Sabbath unto the Lord. Today ye shall not find it in the field. 6 days ye shall gather it, but on the seventh day, which is the Sabbath, in it there shall be none. And it came to pass that there went out some of the people on the seventh day for to gather, and they found none. And the Lord said unto Moses, how long refuse ye to keep my commandments and my laws? See, for that the Lord hath given you the Sabbath. Therefore he given you on the sixth day the bread of 2 days. Abide ye every man in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the seventh day. So the people rested on the seventh day, and the house of Israel called the name thereof manna, and it was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. All right, I'm going to stop there because I know that, I'm sure there's questions, and I know you guys want to comment, but it's only, again, when you understand how the Enochian calendar is laid out, that you can get on every 15th, every 1st, 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th. Those are always Sabbath, which does not happen on the Julian Gregorian calendar. You can go by every month, look at it, and the 15th, maybe a Wednesday one week, maybe a Friday one week, maybe a Saturday. I mean, it changes every month, and it's because that calendar into Kodesh, and the Sabbaths are aligned with, when you understand the way that it works, with the phases of the moon. I hope I explained this to where it was understandable. Go ahead.
Well, Zen, you did a real good job explaining it, probably a better job explaining it than we all do of understanding it, because it's such a... But I've all my citations written down, and it's going to certainly provoke us all to do a lot of study. I really thank you for it. And I think that concerning what Rob was talking about on Virtual House Church last night, that I think it's an issue the Lord wants us to look at. And thank you for that. And I know there's a lot of questions. I want to get one in first, and then I'm sure that many other people do. But in the book of Jubilees, chapter 6, and this is something that I don't understand, in the book of Jubilees, chapter 6, it talks about, in verse 32, a 364-day year. And also in the book of Enoch, chapter 74, and verse 10, it talks about a 364-day year. How do we get that on a Enochian calendar if we've got a 29, 30-day rotation?
Okay, yeah, really good question. All right, when the way that the calendar is set up is that it has 354 days. And so every year there's 10 days that float. The lunar calendar will end 10 days before the solar calendar. And so what they do is every third year or so, they add a month, what is called second Adar. And they determine this by the Feast of the Barley. And if Passover is about to occur and the barley is not ripe, they add a second month. And so when they add that month, it will re-stabilize the calendar, the lunar calendar. And this happens again about every third year. Because, you know, if you have the lunar calendar falling 10 days short every year, it's about in 3 years that you will need to adjust it with one full month. And so that's how they do it. And so because the Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Day of First Fruits begins with the barley feast and the waving of the barley sheath, the barley has to be ripe. And so if the barley is not ripe and they look at it and they determine it's not ripe, they will add another month called Adar 2 at the end of the year. And for that year, there will be actually 13 lunar months in the year rather than 12.
Do we have a scriptural citation for the month of the Adar, the extra month?
Yeah, if you look it up, actually last year on my calendar, we had the second month of Adar. But again, if you look up the Hebrew months, you'll see that according to the barley feast, that they will add this second month of Adar, and it's just called Adar 2. And so it will be, you know, like Rosh Chodesh of Adar, it will be Rosh Chodesh of Adar 2. And the month before will be Rosh Chodesh of Adar, regular Adar, not, you know, Adar 1, just regular, the month of Adar.
Okay, I think Donna's got a reference. What's the reference, Donna, the citation?
Ezra 6:15.
Ezra 6:15. Donna says. So there's a citation for us to look at. All right. Well, I'm going to be quiet. I could just go on all night. But Brother Hall, do you have any questions, or the listeners? And I'm sure we got a bunch.
Wow, my head's swirling with questions, but it's not about me. I always can email Zen and grab his book and look at the calendars. And you're right. Like Rob said last night, it makes you scratch your head. And when it makes you scratch your head, dig deep into the scriptures and figure this stuff out for yourself. The only question I have about, you know, the Sabbath starting at dawn comes from Leviticus 23:32, where we're talking about the Day of Atonement. And the Day of Atonement starts at sundown, which is, you know, it says, "It is a day of Sabbath rest for you, and you must deny yourselves from the evening of the 9th day of the month until the following evening. You are to observe your Sabbath." So I'm, I've got all these scriptures running in my head, Zen, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, I've got to work through this just like everybody else. So from the dawn aspect, it's kind of hard for me to get around that corner on this.
Right.
But you get where I'm coming from, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Honestly, with that aspect, I think I would also.
Yeah.
But just from, and I'm just talking from a first time through, that is problematic for me starting at dawn, but don't want to beleaguer the point at this time, but the Kadesh starting the month, that's the compelling thing for me.
Yes.
Well, we also see in Genesis, the signs are the sun, the moon, and the stars, but there's no mention of barley anywhere, in that. And the other question I had, in the 40 years of the Exodus, when you were reading Exodus 16, there was always 3 miracles during the week. And I wrote it down really quick, and I got to find it again because I've been writing notes on my phone because I keep forgive me, I'm a nerd. Let's see.
Hey, can I answer your first question first?
Sure.
Okay, as far as even now, when I studied Exodus and was looking at the way that Moses, was called forth after midnight in the early mornings, that they weren't allowed to travel on Sabbath. And so it only made sense to me. And then when I discovered these other passages as far as Sabbath, but when I published my 9th book, The Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, I also put in there that a day was from the evening to the evening. And it is. But Sabbath, according to just the story of Exodus, now I could be wrong, but I'm just saying that according to the story of Exodus, the Sabbath was celebrated from sunrise to sunset, because that early morning Moses went to go see Pharaoh, and he also went and told his congregation, to be ready to go. But and then it was during the day that they celebrated, and then in the evening they were released to leave. And so that's the only, and those 3 verses that I read. But as far as, I also understood it to be from evening to evening, like you guys did. But in decrypting this from the story of Exodus, well, then it made sense to me that it could only be in the day that Sabbath was celebrated, because then he wouldn't have been able to go see Pharaoh. And then also, if it was on that same day, well, then how would the Most High break his own Sabbath and allow Israel to leave in the evening if that day was also Sabbath? Do you see what I'm saying as far as that?
Yeah, I get. No, it helps for me to understand where you're coming from for your position. There's 2 or 3 things that have me hung up. The Day of Atonement that I just mentioned, Yeshua's death, burial, and resurrection is another one I've got to get around. And the manna, because Yahweh, and you and I both agree that Yahweh is not a God of confusion.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
we're in agreement on that.
Yes.
The manna part, there was always those 3 miracles during the 40 years that they were out there. No manna fell on the 7th day, and we agree there.
Right.
They could not keep manna overnight without spoilage. We agree there. But they kept manna on the Sabbath, and it remained sweet and fresh, and we both agree on that.
Right.
But it always seemed like on a set day. Like it never failed. The 3 miracles came that week, but it was always on the set day. And it was always in and through the manna. And you see that through the 40 years out in the wilderness. But he always kept it on a set day. The people knew that the Sabbath was coming by these.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. And
I understand what you're saying, because you're having a difficult time incorporating Kadesh into the breakup of these 7-day sabbatical weeks. Yes, and I understand that. It was confusing for me as well. But even like when I studied some of the Targums, I see that Solomon and David, they also recognized and honored Kadesh. And it's Kadesh that determines the following 4 7-day sabbatical weeks. So Sabbath does always fall on the 7 days, but that 7-day determination is not run together as we see it on the Gregorian Julian solar calendar. It's actually determined by Kadesh. And so Kadesh is the first day and Sabbath of the lunar month. And then the next 4 following 7-day sabbatical weeks, on those 7 days, that is Sabbath for those next 4 weeks. It's just understanding how Kadesh has a part to play within that determination that makes it difficult. Now, as far as as far as the Sabbath being celebrated from dawn to dusk, I do see that in some of the in some of the passages and texts that I read, but I'm not fully 100% on that myself, because even as I wrote it in the Flat Earth is Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, I wrote it in that book that it was from the evening to the evening, and I incorporated the night with the day as one full day as a Sabbath. And so this is still something that is new to me, but I presented it in Decrypting the Book on the account in Exodus because it only makes sense to me that the Sabbath was celebrated from dawn to dusk, because he would not have been able to go out to see Pharaoh, and then that evening they wouldn't have been able to leave Egypt. And so God would be breaking Sabbath if he allowed Moses to go out that night, either of those nights, if Sabbath was longer than from dawn to dusk. You see what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
God wouldn't break his own Sabbath. And
Well,
so that's,
we agree there. He would not.
yeah,
That
absolutely.
wholeheartedly, he would not. And it's important for us to be Bereans, and like David, it's line by line, precept by precept. We have to go through this.
Right.
I'm sorry, David. It's just I had questions.
Oh no, you go ahead, Brother Hall. I really want to hear your input on this, and
No, we all learn together. It's like
that's
this.
what we are. We're studying here, and we don't by any means want to demean anybody
No.
that holds another position. And I believe that if we are trying to obey the Lord with the best light we've got, he honors that. And if he doesn't, I'd have been in big trouble a month ago, because I'd never even thought of it, you know. So thank God he judges us by our heart and not our head. But at the same time, I think it's good for us to study this. And Zen has really brought it to the table tonight to give us the citations to look at and study. And we need to study it, and we need to listen to contrary opinions, like the Bible says.
Absolutely.
He that answereth mattereth before he heareth it. It's a following a shame unto him. And always, when I put forth a really controversial idea, I like to find the most intelligent person that has a contrary to position to read that. So it's certainly, but like I say, I really was greatly impressed by the arguments then put forth on the Enochian calendar. And I'm going to shut up because I'm sure there's so many questions. And, you know, Brother John, what's your take on this so far? See, Brother Jon Pounders.
Help if I turn my mic on here. You know, at this point, I am definitely prompted to study it very heavily for myself, because you know there was a lot of things about the Gregorian Saturday that had me wondering, why does it always line up on the Gregorian Saturday, the Sabbath? Why does everything that doesn't make sense to me? And I think everybody's had that question. Why does it always line up on the Gregorian Saturday if we're supposed to judge by when the new moon is each year? Why does it always line up on that day? So definitely have some studying to do. It doesn't, and I don't know about you guys, but does that make sense to you why it lines up every Saturday on the 7th day of the Gregorian calendar? What, you know, obviously we've had a whole show about why you think it doesn't, Zen, but I mean, to be perfectly honest with ourselves, can we really say that that makes sense? I mean, I want to hear John and David's intake on that, and I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna be studying it And I've already heard Zen obviously doesn't believe it does. And it's an interesting thing for sure. I mean, I always want to know the truth about these subjects. So I've been listening, but I like any normal person, like every time we prompt our audience, don't go by what we say, study it out for yourself and see if you can figure it out based on the Holy Spirit prompting you to do so. But yeah, I guess a question to John and David: why does it always line up on the Gregorian Saturday if that's correct? I mean, it doesn't quite make sense to me.
It's a good question. It really, really is. And that's, I hate saying that because it's a cliche. Sorry, guys. But anyways, the Saturday, okay, and you can look at the pagan word Saturday, whatever, but in every language, almost on this biblical enclosed flat earth, the Sabbath in Hebrew is Sabbath. Greek is Sabbato. I mean, every language has its own, and it's that day. It's a set seventh day, and that's a weak answer because you put me on the spot, because I too need to study this out further. But Zen, it's like Rob last night. Man, this has got my head. I'm scratching my head here. It's like, I need to go in and dig deep into this and find out for myself, so I could say something more intelligent than every language on the planet flat Earth calls Saturday a Sabbath. But I mean, it doesn't answer your question fully. But
well, I mean, I need to dig. Nothing fully has, and it's my fault because I have been very lazy on this subject, mainly because it's like, man, I don't want to change what my Sabbath day is. It makes it so easy to know, like, it's every Saturday from here on out. But when I really truly think about it, it's like, I mean, this is a Gregorian calendar, so we know that the month starts 14 days before Passover. At least, that's when the year starts for that. But it's not always a Saturday the following Sabbath. I mean, correct? Am I correct? I mean, that it just doesn't.
Well, and you're right, John. For me, and I'm going to get in trouble. I know I am. It's going to come back on me. For work, I've got to fight tooth and nail to keep off on the Sabbath. And in nursing, I mean, you work 7 days a week. Some days I go on call, and it's like, but I have to fight tooth and nail. And every once in a while, I get caught on one, and then I have to work through that. But it's easier. Maybe that's it. It's just easier to know from sunset on Friday to sunset on Saturday. My family and I are doing Shabbat. But again, listening to Zen and also listening to Rob last night, now I've got my head scratching here, and I really need to look at it. And there's a few things I got some hangups on, and I need to work through those. So there's my answer, bro.
It's just a matter of me being lazy about it, man, to be honest. And I hate that. I mean, because I try my best to just be. I try to like really take. I was going to say take pride, but not really take pride. I try to take great caution in what I study and what I do, and this has been something that I've been lazy on, and I don't know why, but it's definitely been that way. So, anyways,
the only other thing I could say is Yahweh doesn't change, so why would His Sabbath change? But again, it goes back to the
Gregorian calendar,
right? It goes along with the Gregorian calendar, which He doesn't follow. I mean, He follows His calendar, and determining what that calendar is for us to do.
Exactly.
Right.
I would also say
the same feeling here that I did when I began studying the flat earth and the old so-called head. But I found that what I at first took for confusion was actually the Lord trying to get some things through to me. And this is one of those things where a lot of people would say, well, boy, you shouldn't even look at these things. But this is one of those things that on Now You See TV, we do look at it. And we do put it on the table to kick it around and study, to let everyone become fully persuaded in their own mind. And I've got my citations written down here tonight to do fuller study. And I too, and here a while back, John said something about doing a show on the calendars if I wanted to come on it. And I said, ain't no use to have me on there. I don't know anything about it. And
as you can see,
Ben just sent me his books, and I read those, and yeah, boy, I said, I get, man, he's got something here. And I think one of the things that really stands out to me tonight is the passage in Sirach, beginning in 43:6, where it is a strong testimony that it is the moon that does determine the holy days. So there's just a lot of things here that it's kind of like flat earth. I come to the place where I said, well, I believe it. And, I wanted to really, give it a good look, because you don't want to come out and say in January the earth's flat. You repent in March, and this is a same type of thing. I don't, doggone it, sin might be right, but I ain't going to say it, because I don't want to have to repent in about 60 days. So, that's not where I'm at here. But I love it. I love it to death. I appreciate Zen, because he'll challenge us. And he's got me grabbing all my books here tonight and writing it all down. And I just love it. And I know our listeners love it. And because we love truth. And we know that with God, there's no small things. And we are in these days when knowledge is being increased. And he's just pouring it out. So we're going to search it out and eat it up. And we're going to walk closer and closer and more pleasing to the Lord as the days go forward. And I just love it. I'm just excited with it. So I'm going to shut up and let the listeners' questions get in here.
I got one more thing before we move on to something new. David, you're going to want to write this down as well. And this is from Isaiah chapter 66, verse 22 and 23. Because God tells us here that after he creates the new heaven and the new earth, and he establishes the millennial reign, and he says in verse 23, and it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. And that word for new moon is chodesh. And so in the Sabbath is Shabbat. So it says, and it shall come to pass that from one chodesh to another chodesh, and from one Sabbath to another Sabbath, shall all flesh come to worship before me. And so he's telling you how it is chodesh that aligns and determines Sabbath, and that after he creates the new heavens and the new earth, that he will be worshiped and celebrated from Kadesh and every Sabbath.
Ding, ding. Got you, little buddy.
All right. Well,
it's interesting too. I just want to state this real quick, because I think that something I've pondered a lot, even in the Jewish calendar, the Hebrew calendar, the names of the months are false gods in most of the names of the months. Exactly. And so it makes you really wonder and think about it. And I think that is an interesting way to look at it. Each new moon is a new month. I mean, I think that's right. Probably it's interesting. I'm like David. I don't want to say something I'm going to have to go back on, but you prompted me to study it. There's no doubt, and I'm kind of upset with you for it. So
it's all right.
Yeah.
Sorry, here's the other
important just thing. A doggone aggravating little guy.
Well, Steve started this last night with me, so this is the second night in a row I'm getting hit with this stuff. It's like,
Think about this also, that before we had calendars we could hang on the wall. You're a shepherd. You're out there with your lambs. You're out there with your flocks. You're spending weeks at a time out there in the pastures. You're not near any computer. You can't just pull up the day. What do you look at to determine what the day and the month is? The moon. You see that when it's a Kodesh, a waxing crescent, a brand new moon, that is the beginning of the new lunar month. When it's a first quarter moon, that's the second Sabbath. That's the 8th day of the lunar month. When it's a full moon, that's the 15th day. That's the third Sabbath. When it's a third quarter moon, that's the 4th Sabbath. And so you can determine what day, and usually you can keep up with what month it is, and you can tell where you are on that calendar according to God's calendar just by looking up at the moon and seeing what phase it's in. And you can determine because according to the phases of the moon, when Sabbath is occurring. And so you can celebrate Sabbath and celebrate these different changes in the lunar month just by seeing the moon, which is something that is completely impossible on a Gregorian calendar. If you have a prisoner or somebody that gets detained, locked up, doesn't see the skies for a very long time, comes out. According to Gregorian calendar, you can't look up at the moon and determine where you are, what month, what day it is. It doesn't make any sense. But according to God's calendar, you see the moon, you see it's a very thin sliver. That's Chodesh. We're at the beginning of the new of the month. If it's a first quarter moon, that's the second week. We're near the second Sabbath. If it's a full moon, that's near the 15th. And that's the way it works every month. So those shepherds, the people of Israel, those people that lived outside, that didn't have all these lights and city lights and weren't always inside, but spent a great deal of time outside, they could tell just by seeing the moon where they were in the month and when it was coming to be near Sabbath. I mean, that in the simplicity, the beauty, the recognition, the connection to the heavens with God's calendar and the way that it's laid out and determined by the moon is absolutely magnificent. And there could be no better system or setup than the way that he has established it.
And you know, some have said that, boy, this is so complicated, but when you begin to grasp it, it really might be more simple.
It is. It's a lot more simple, actually.
You know,
one of John's and my friend, everybody knows him as Zach Bauer, and you know he does a lot of farming, homesteading. If it's new to Torah, homesteading. He, you know, and since he's been out there, I've heard him say on several of his videos, man, being outdoors, being able to look up at the stars and the moon, has changed his whole perspective on, you know, how he views when the Sabbath start, when the feast days start. And it's pretty profound. And you're right. You know, if a prisoner goes in and he doesn't see, you know, the sun or the stars or the moon for several years or however long, and then comes out, he's not going to be able to tell by the Gregorian calendar when he goes outside. There's no way. You're absolutely right when you say that. And I thought of Zach Bauer, you know, and his few of the videos I've seen him in, when he looks at the moon and the stars now being out, you know, underneath them for the period of time that he has, it's just changed his perspective on the whole subject. And it's very interesting that you made that analogy. Just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the way that I see the creation now is like a giant clockwork. Like when I went out, I watched the sunset on the winter solstice and I saw where it set. And that is the most southern point of its setting on the winter solstice, because it's on that day that it reverses course and begins moving north. And so for the next 6 months until the summer solstice, the sunset will be moving towards the north. On the summer solstice, it will be at its most northern extreme as far as its setting. And so I can tell by seeing where the sun sets, what month we are in, and you know its placement as it moves back and forth between the solstices, and also with the way that the moon is cycling in the skies. I know which way is north. Looking at the stars, looking and seeing Polaris, I know where the center of the vaulted dome is. I understand my placement in the creation at all times now, because it's all working around me as a giant clockwork. And because I understand my place in it, I know exactly where I am, what direction I'm looking at, where the center of the vaulted dome is, where the sun will rise, where the sun will set, where the moon will be according to its lunar phases. I mean, and when you understand all of those things, for those people that are outside all the time, you can't ever be lost, because you always know which direction you're facing according to the alignment of either the stars, the sun, or the moon. You always know where you are.
At a Hebrew hot dog weenie roast, wouldn't he?
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to make this all confusing for everybody who's in the chat room now. I'm in a Babylonian system. We just went from 2016 to 2017. That means when, you know, I receive mail, it's going to have the date on it. When I get my check from work, it's going to have the date on it. There's no way I can get around it. But this is not my new year. Tonight means it's just another night. guys, and I have enjoyed being in His Word with you guys. But there are so many questions over here we need to get to, and I hope you.
Yeah, get to them, John. I was going to say I just made a comment on Facebook. You know, it's New Year. There's a lot of people I see posting pictures of Mariah Carey and all these different things, but we're over here on Now You See TV studying the calendar of Enoch. I mean, it's pretty cool.
I love it.
Yeah.
Don't get no better than that.
Well, I sent John a picture of the ball that went down in New York. It's a huge, gigantic ball of 2,000 triangles, of different triangles with an eye right in the middle of it.
Oh my gosh!
In the middle of the triangles, and I'm going, "Hello, McFly."
Yeah, people are all on that New Year ball drop stuff, man. It's crazy to see. It's weird when you're set apart, when you see things a little. And I'm not trying to brag, like saying we're better than anybody, but I'm just saying, like, when you look at things through a different eye, all that stuff is just like, this is the world's thing. This is all Lucifer's stuff right here. That has nothing to do with me. And
Right.
it's really neat to be able to see it like that. And I hope I'm not offending anybody by saying that. I'm not trying to say we're better than anybody, but I'm just thankful to be in the world, but not of it. And when you can see it from this perspective of this world's controlled by Lucifer, this world's controlled by Satan, it's controlled by the powers of this world, spiritual wickedness in high places. Like David was reading that verse about in the chapters of Solomon there. Those are the ones that are putting these events on. They're the ones that causing us to seek after these signs and these events. So anyways, I'll shut up and let the questions go, because I know that we have a lot, and I know we've already been 2.5 hours almost in. So go for it, John.
Are you guys ready? The hot seat is hot.
We are ready.
Okay.
Brother Hall.
This one comes from Valerie. So according to this, it sounds like the stars, and this goes way back to the beginning of when you started doing a teaching, David. It sounds like the stars are not angels, not if the angels move the stars. How does the angels and stars coexist, or are they one and the same, in your opinion, David?
In script, well, they're different, but yet they're the same. How's that for a politically correct answer? But in Scripture, we hear about the host of heaven. And I could give you scriptures about the host of heaven that apply to angels. And I could give you scriptures about hosts of heaven that apply to stars. The same thing. There are some scriptures that speak of stars as stars and some of stars of angels. And the truth, as is explained in the book of Enoch, that these stars are moved by angels. And that's why we see this correlation. And this understanding, to me, just really opened a lot of stuff up. And, you know, we weren't taught this in science class. We were taught gravity, which Mr. Newton pulled out of his tuchus, and all of these things. So we're reworking these things. But I believe, I give a lot of validity to the book of Enoch, and this made so much sense to me when I understood that the angels are really moving these stars, and that the fallen angels are going to act up and going to move them where they shouldn't go, and this is going to cause this cosmic upheaval that the Lord speaks about. And I believe, and I bet Zen would agree, that in Genesis 1:2, when we had the destruction of the pre-Adamite world, that this was also the case, that fallen angels moved the stars and the heavenly luminaries, causing these disruptions. And I believe when the Bible speaks of Rahab, that Rahab is a planet, and also a planet or a star or whatever you want to call it, and also a fallen being. So, and if you would read those references, I had them written down here somewhere. You might want to read those. Psalm 89. Well, let me read those real quick. Well, no, I won't, because we're so late. But Psalm 89:10 and Psalm 51:9, and also David Flynn in his book, The Chronicles of Mars. He also believed that Rahab was also a planet. So that's my understanding, and it comes from the book of Enoch, that it's both. It's of angel moving the stars, and good angels are up there, and the fallen angels are going to get their hand in and move them where the Lord doesn't intend.
Excellent. Let's see. Anybody hear of a comet coming tonight? Has anybody heard that? It's another question that came out of the chat, that a comet was barreling towards the biblical enclosed Earth.
I've heard
Anybody?
it. I don't know what to make of it. Obviously, I hear that it seems like every week somebody's saying that, so I don't know.
Okay. Well, moving on to the next. I hope Donna can help me out with this, because I don't know how to pronounce this next one. Are we going to look at the X? I can't pronounce this. Donna, help me out here.
She is away from the computer right now, John.
Of course she would be.
She is heading toward the computer here.
EXOUSIAS. I don't know what that is. I never heard that. Exodus.
I believe that is one of the words for power. One is doing, and the other is exousia.
Oh, exousia. That's how you pronounce that.
I would believe. I think that is one of the Greek words translated power. One is dunamis, and the other is exousia. I believe that's what that is.
Well, CB was asking, are we going to look at the exousias as well? I don't know what that means.
Okay, spell it again, John. I might be wrong. I'm missing
EXOUSIAS.
Okay, I don't think that is not the same as the Greek word for power. And I don't know what CB's got there.
I don't either.
Explain us, give us a little more there, CB.
Do you know anything, Zen?
No, clueless on this one.
Moving on to the next one, Giorgio, I'm slightly shocked to know that the end of the year is not today. Am I right?
That's wrong.
I agree. No. Though we're all stuck in the Babylonian system, and of course now it's 2017 and everything coming to us via mail checks or whatever that is going to be talked about in that light. Let's see, and it doesn't make us any better than the next person. It just makes us know the truth.
Amen.
That's all it does. And what do we do with it?
The end of the year on the Hebrew calendar is the month of Adar, which ends right before the beginning of spring. Again, God's calendar, as we said in Exodus, it begins in the month of Abib, which is the month of Nisan. And as I explained in my Flat Earth book, the vernal equinox begins the 3 months of spring, and the summer solstice begins the 3 months of summer. The autumnal equinox begins the 3 months of fall, and then the winter solstice begins the 3 months of winter. And that's how God's calendar is lined up: spring, summer, fall, winter, which is the linear progression of the seasons.
And I will say about the truth, we're responsible for what we do with that truth. So I wanted to bring that up. And tonight marks, if you follow my Facebook page, tonight is 100 days until we celebrate in this house Passover. If you followed our Facebook page, we started that kind of 170 days ago, or 70 days ago, and we're still going with it. So anyways, moving on to the next one. This one comes from Mark. The Messiah was crucified on the day of Passover, the 14th of Nisan, not on the day of unleavened bread. He also rose just before sunset on Saturday. Can you speak to that, Zen, a little bit? That's one of the questions I had.
Yes, he was the Passover lamb. He was crucified on Passover, and he was taken off the cross at about 3 p.m., and then he was entombed that evening, and then he was, for the Feast of Unleavened Bread, he was entombed until the morrow after the Sabbath, which was in the 17th, I believe, of Nisan, that he rose again, and he was the high priest for the celebration of the Day of First Fruits, the Feast of First Fruits, and he offered the resurrected dead to the Father, Yahweh Elohim, as the as the first fruits of the resurrected dead. And it even speaks about in Scripture that he was the first of the resurrected dead, because he brought them up. He ascended and took them. We covered this from the Gospel of Nicodemus a couple shows back, a long time ago. I don't remember which show, but he went up and took them, Adam and the patriarchs that were in Abraham's bosom, and delivered them over to Michael. They were baptized in the Archerusian lake, and then allowed to enter into the city of paradise, New Jerusalem, which is in the third heaven with Yahweh Elohim, and that's what will descend out of the heavens on, Revelation 21.
I thank you, Zen. This one's from Cott. Zen, in your latest book, he says he needs a slideshow or something visual to understand this more. I think once he gets more into it, are you going to do anything like that, like a slideshow or a DVD?
For my latest book, The Firmament?
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
No more
When I have the time, I'm working on a trilogy right now, The War in Heaven, The Great Contest. See, this is the problem. I don't have the time to even create slideshow presentations, video presentations for the radio shows that I do, much less my books. Yeah, I'd love to do that, but I don't have the time.
Well, if we have you for a conference sometime, you're going to have to make the times then. So,
Well, that's something different. I can prepare for something like that if I know ahead of time. But
all right then.
Yeah, something like that. I even take, like some of the shows I've done with Rob on the Flat Earth as Key to Decrypt the Book of Enoch, the Vaulted Dome of the Earth. Some of those shows I've actually taken the time to make slideshow presentation, so you can look to that work. But I don't have time to do every one in every book.
I'll tell you this. Okay, so we're going to be doing a conference on Passover, right? So if you guys are interested in the idea and you would come to something like this, the idea of Rob, David, and Zen sitting and talking about the calendar for part of the conference, let me know on Facebook. If you don't follow me on Facebook, do it. Do the same for John and David. David, you need to get a Facebook, man.
Zen needs to do a DVD or a slideshow, and David needs to get a Facebook page. Come on, guys.
You guys slack.
You guys are slacking on us. Come on, man.
But hey, we're
too busy studying Torah.
Now I was enjoying picking on Zen. Now they're picking on me.
Fair.
All right.
That's right.
This next one.
We'll just all put our big boy pants on and do what we got to do.
Amen. This one comes from Lag Plays. This is from the YouTube chat, and I pulled it over. Zen, can you explain, is the new moon a full moon?
No, it's not. As I showed and as I shared from Philo, Enoch, and also the wisdom of son of Sirach, it's a waxing crescent that is growing, repairing, renewing itself. Even the word, when you look up the word Chodesh in the Strongs, it comes from the verb Chadash, Chadash, which means to renew, to repair, to re-illuminate itself. And so the Chodesh is a waxing crescent. It's not a full moon.
Excellent. Let's see. Let's see if you've answered this one. Yeah, we went over that one. Cott, it's just me, or has there a lot of talk lately about the calendars, Torah, feast days? And I think this is just a comment. And Shabbats lately. Maybe it's because I'm so new to Torah observance, but it leads me to think the Ruach is moving through people to show us all something very important. Would you guys agree that he's moving?
Especially with the way, and I don't even know if Rob had an idea of what the show was going to be about tonight. And it just seems like,
yes,
the Holy Ghost is saying, take a look. It's time to take a look. And I think we're all moved to really examine this. And I know many of our listeners are. So I absolutely agree with that.
I do as well, because as David read in Jubilees chapter 6, it's more than the cosmology which has been altered. Satan has established a replacement, a substitute for not only the cosmology, but the calendar system and also the holy days. Most mainstream Christians worship Sabbath on a Sunday every 7 days, which, as I said, the Sabbath floats according to Chodesh. And also, we observe Christmas and Easter and put up Christmas trees and things like that, which are pagan. The real feast days and the real holy days are the Levitical feast days: Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, the Pentecost, and the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles. Those are the real holy days. And how many Christians do you know that observe those?
And like I said earlier, I think we need to lift our vision higher, that we're not just talking about being letter perfect on a physical observance, but in the book of Ezekiel, and I read 46, 1 and 9, there are actually gates and doors that open in God's heavenly temple on certain days and at certain times. And it's important for us to understand that we are seated with Him in heavenly places, that we can come boldly before the throne of grace, and that we can dwell in the secret place of the Most High, and that
Amen.
spiritual blessings are there for us. And you know, we can pray to God anytime. I'm not saying that. We can be blessed and worship any day, but yet at specific times, God's blessings are more abundant for us, or more right for us in the spiritual world. And I believe that. And I also believe that there are specific times when the powers of darkness are more prevalent. And that's why the powers of evil were at specific times. And isn't this just like something the devil would do to get in the middle of this and cause confusion? And like we talked in another very compelling show we did on opening the gates of Enoch, that there was an understanding in ancient times about how these gates worked. The evil ones understood it, and we looked at the Dendera zodiac, how there were 12 gates on it, and you could just see the understanding of those gates. And God's people, I believe, are going to recover their understanding of these heavenly gates and the times that we can come into a new realm of anointing and power in these last days. And we see this in the book of Revelation, chapter 11, with the miraculous power that was performed by the two witnesses, and the ability the Elijah had to open and to command those gates to shut. And this is the same as we see the miracles that happened on a weekly basis during the Exodus. And we know that the plagues of Exodus are going to be repeated in the book of Revelation. You know, we can see those parallels. So there's just a lot of reasons more than just being letter perfect, I think, that's behind all this. There's a big spiritual reason that the Lord wants us to look at that, look at these things.
Amen. I have one other thing, and I think that's what you said is very important, David, because I think that the creation is coming together in celebration and prayer, and we are missing out on those times because we have lost connection with that. But in rediscovering what we are, because even the Hebrew people, remember, they had, in recognizing the lunar calendar, they established and understood when Sabbath would occur. So they had set their whole lives around that. And because we have embraced the Gregorian Julian solar calendar and we have lost connection with these sacred times, the Moedim and the appointed times, we get caught up in going to work, and it's easier for us to celebrate just on Saturday or on Sunday. And it can be difficult to honor and to recognize. But I think the most important part of all that is first acknowledging and coming to recognition that we are celebrating incorrectly, and that we are honoring the wrong days, as it says in Jubilees, and that we are respecting and revering an unholy day, as far as Sabbath, and that we have lost connection with the appointed times. And that when we reestablish connection and determination of when those days actually are, then at least we can acknowledge them. And even if we are working and caught up in the Babylonian system, at least we know when the correct days are as they are unfolding, and then we can try to adapt accordingly. Then it's just a matter of becoming and acknowledging and recognizing when they occur correctly, and then we can, you know, adapt our behaviors and our work schedules and everything else after that, just as the Hebrew and the Jews did prior to accepting and embracing the Julian system, because we're having to do it backwards now. You know, we're having to relearn and re-educate and regain this knowledge, and then we can shift things accordingly to that.
Well, you guys just answered two questions. And so one from Brian, could you explain? You guys are good right there from Brian. This one comes, this one's kind of long, but it comes from Hebrews 4:9, chapter 4, verse 9. It says, there remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. Rest in this verse from the Strongs is G4520, sabbatomos, form of derivative of G4521, Sabbatism, that is figuratively the repose of Christianity as a type of heaven or heaven's rest. How does this pertain to tonight's subject?
Great question. And this is how, and this is what I've learned as far as scripture. The reason we have a day of rest and the reason it is instituted into the creation is because on that day of rest, the Most High God wants us to recognize our connection with Him and with the creation. And He wants us to focus on that connection and to honor Him and our relationship with Him. And so when the Sabbath is not to just rest, but to recognize that connection and to celebrate and to seek out deeper relationship with Him, which is why in the Torah and in the Targums on the day of Sabbath, the prophets, the elder patriarchs and the prophets, they studied Torah from sunrise to sunset, and they studied it in order to get into deeper understanding of God's word and the gospel. And that's what, in my opinion, Sabbath is about, is coming to deeper introspection, understanding, and relationship with God. Not just, even though we do need to have balance and we do need to have rest, He wants us to seek Him out and have a day completely focused on Him, which is why I tell, you know, a lot of people ask me, um, if we start honoring the Hebrew calendar, the lunar calendar in this way, and I have to work on those days, what do I do? And I tell them that, you know, try to put your focus, even if you are working or whatever it is that you're doing, if you can't just have a day to where you just settled out, and focus on reading or studying Torah, that wherever you are, just place your focus on God. Place your focus on seeking Him. Be in prayer that whole day, no matter what it is you're doing. Sing worshipful prayer songs to Him while you're working. You can make, you know, whatever it is that you're doing, you can place emphasis and focus on God, no matter what that is, and give Him the courtesy and the honor for that, you know, as far as the Sabbath day being a day of rest and reverence. And that the point of Sabbath, in my opinion, is to come to closer relationship with Him and with the creation, and to recognize our connection with all things in that mysterious way.
Amen. And in that passage in verse 10 and 11 of Hebrews 4, it says, for he that is entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works, as God did from his. Let us therefore labor to enter into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief. And it is so true. The statement that Christ is our Sabbath is true. He said, come unto me, all ye that labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And when we enter into Christ, we can rest from our own labors to save ourselves or sanctify ourselves. But that does not negate our obligation to walk in obedience to God's law to the very best that we understand it. And the reason, as Zen said, is it's for our own blessing, because at God's precise times, there are special blessings that I believe cannot be had at any other time. And when we do this, it is such a blessing to us. And I believe that all of us, as we walk in all the light we have to obey God's commandments, that he will greatly bless us.
You said something the other night, David, that was profound. We follow the doctrine of Christ,
Yes.
period. So we see Yeshua, and we're to pick up our cross and follow him. Every instance on every Shabbat, you would see him go into the temple and teach. And teaching on the Shabbat, he was observing the Sabbath. So we are to follow him. Logically, it makes logical sense to do what he did and do as he did. So
Yeah.
It made perfect sense the other night how you said it. We are to follow the doctrine of Christ and do as he did.
Absolutely. And I use a little acronym, the C, the D, and the E. The cross, the doctrine, and the example. And it's not just his doctrine, which we talked about for a whole program on Now You See, but it's his example, the way he did things. And you cannot imagine our Lord not honoring his Father's Sabbath. You just can't imagine that. There's just no way. And and also the cross. We have to understand that in that finished work of the cross, we have our salvation, we have our sanctification, and we also have his example to follow, how that he walked, and he perfectly kept God's law. And sin, in 1 John 3 and 4, sin is the transgression of the law. So we know that our Lord never broke the Father's law at any time. And in him, we see that perfect example. So we balance. These are the things I try to strike the balance with: his cross, his doctrine, and his example, the C, the D, and the E. And if we do that, we can't go wrong.
Well, Proverbs 4 says, I give you sound doctrine, my Torah. And Yeshua is the walking, talking, living, standing at the right hand of the Father, alive right now, our example of his word. So there you go. Good word, guys. I love it's just
get me going. Just get me going. And when we see Jesus, we see what the Father is. How easy did the Father make it that he sent the Son to reveal himself unto us? And we just have to look and see and read and follow. It's there, just like we said, it's the simplicity of Christ. There it is. It's all in him.
Oh, really quick, because I want to get to these questions. I was reading John chapter 9, and it starts out, and passing by. That's how the verse 1 starts out. And passing by, an entire event happened of the blind man they couldn't see, and the disciples asking, did his parents sin? And so Yeshua had to teach them Torah, that it wasn't a generational curse, that everything, not everything is a generational curse, that manifest Yahweh's miracles. He was born for this, to manifest Yahweh's miracles. And then the Pharisees got involved, and he had to go before the Pharisees and call them out. He said, look, I've been blind all my life, and now I can see, and you're trying to get me to say something bad about, gee, I'm not going to do it, right? He called them out. So just in one passage, in passing by, and we're to follow him in passing by and be his example. What a word, David. I love when you do that. Okay, moving on. Zen, David, what are the differences between, what is a conjunction moon?
The conjunction moon is when the moon follows exactly the sun. It's the dark phase of the moon where we can't see it because it is directly lined up with the sun. And in that phase, it's called the dark phase of the moon. That's when the moon rises with the sun, crosses the sky with the sun, and sets with the sun, and will do that until it starts to digress, because the moon is slower in revolution than the sun. Every day it lags about 50 minutes behind the sun, which is why it digresses through its phases. And over 29.531 days, it will go through its full the full phase from conjunction to conjunction. But that's what lunar conjunction, that particular phase is. It's when you can't see it because it's moving with the sun. And then it's only when it becomes a sliver, the waxing crescent, and we see it again, that it begins to renew itself in its light. On the first day, it's 1/7 portion full, and then in 14 days, it will be a full moon. In another 14 days, or 29, 14 and a half days, it will become completely void of light. Those are the different phases of the moon.
Okay, Mark asked, is there a possibility or a Hebrew, is there a possibility a Hebrew month that has been removed from the historical record?
No, there's 12 months, and then they add one, Adar 2, whenever they need it.
Okay. Kyle asked, so the first sight of light in the moon, that is when the month starts?
Yes, when you see the first sliver in the moon, that is Kadesh. That's the waxing crescent. Waxing means growing, and when it's in the lunar conjunction, the conjunctive moon, it's completely dark. It's completely void of light, and then it will start to digress from the sun, and it will become a very thin sliver. And every day it will gain 1/7 portion. And so in 7 days it will become first quarter moon, and then in 7 more days it will become full moon. And so each of those phases is lined up with Sabbath. In after Kadesh, in 7 days you have second Sabbath, which is aligned to first quarter moon, and then 7 more days you have full moon, which is aligned to the third Sabbath, and then the third quarter moon, 7 more days, that's aligned to the fourth Sabbath. And then in 7 more days, it will become completely black. That's called the conjunctive moon. And that's aligned to the fifth Sabbath.
Okay, this one comes from Brian. Where do the blood moons fit in all this, guys? Or do they? The blood moons.
Go ahead, Zen. Don't go quiet on us now.
Boom, 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 boom.
No, you're not hitting the bottom part of the left button.
Boom, 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 boom.
Well, they're red. Okay.
I guess nobody knows, so we're going on to the next one here.
Yeah, we're going to go on to the next one. Well, I tell you what,
I think we'll pass on that. I think we start talking about the blood moons here. My head would pop. I just don't think we got enough time to begin to explore that. I'm sorry. We'll better pass on that for the moment.
We'll pass on that. We'll come back to it. Rob Skiba's got a teaching, the tetrads. Go watch that on the YouTube,
Yeah,
and then you can.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. My mouse came unplugged, so I wasn't able to unmute it.
Okay, let's see. Question for tours. Going down, you guys have answered a lot of these. Oh, Mark Rowe, didn't they actually get quail to eat at even and the manna in the morning? So the quail in the evening and the manna in the morning. Is that how that worked out? Or was that? I gotta look. Exodus.
Yes.
What? Okay.
Exodus 16. But yes, God sent them quail in the evening after the Sabbath on the on that 15th day, and then the next morning when the morning dew showed up, that's when the manna showed up with it. Which, remember, on the 15th, that's the Sabbath, and then you have 6 days of receiving manna, and then that's why on the 6th day they had a double portion. Because on the 7th day, that would be the 22nd. That was also a Sabbath.
Okay. Moving on, Tracy says, question, Zen, is all this explained on your calendar?
All what explained?
I guess everything you went over tonight. Yeah.
No, not everything. Yes, as far as on my calendar, I have when every chodesh occurs, and then the following 4 7-day sabbatical weeks. I have all the 12 every day. The first, like today is the second day of Tibet, and then the tomorrow is the third day of Tibet. I have every day according to the Hebrew months. This coming Saturday on the 8th of Tibet, that's the second Sabbath, the first quarter moon Sabbath. All of that is on the calendar, and also the various, as far as the festivals, Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost, the Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, Tabernacles, all of that. Hanukkah is also on there, and some other minor feasts are on this as well. But yes, all of that is on the calendar.
I already asked the question, are you going to make a slideshow or DVD? But okay. It's just more work for Zen. Let's see here. Those questions you've answered. Do you think the two witnesses will set all this right and set everything straight when they get here?
Well, I think the two witnesses most certainly have their work cut out, but I don't think it has to do with specifically this. I think it's up to us, in that we are being stood up to bring all of this forward. That with the rediscovery of the true cosmology, as far as the flat earth and the enclosed world system, that this is part of that. Because in decrypting the book of Enoch, the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, this was part of the decryption of that particular text, is that I discovered, according to all of those verses and chapters, that there was a calendar system which Enoch was describing, which I was completely unfamiliar with. But then when I began to examine and to look into what he was talking about, I discovered that it lined up with God's calendar that he had given to Adam. And I show this in my book, that he gave it to Adam as the book of the signs, and Adam gave this to Enoch. Enoch gave it to Noah. Noah gave it to Shem, and it was after Shem that it was lost. And that's when, Jubilees chapter 6, all of that took place, where the calendar system was changed. All of that was altered. It was restored to Moses during the Exodus, as I talked about this evening. But since the the 4th century, since the time of Hillel, and since the embrace of the Julian and Gregorian calendar systems, all this knowledge has been lost again. And so the determination of Sabbath, all that has been misunderstood, misplaced. When the beginning of the month occurs, how Sabbath aligns to the lunar phases, and how also that you can only, by following the Enochian calendar, you can really determine when the Levitical feast days occur. And so all of that is part of the knowledge which is being brought forth in the book of Enoch, and the rediscovery of all that ancient wisdom. Not only does the book of Enoch teach us about the Nephilim and the giants and all of that, but it also teaches us about true cosmology, and that the calendar system is encoded in there, as it is in Jubilees. Jubilees talks a lot about this particular calendar system, and we are all working together in fellowship to rediscover all this lost knowledge. And so we are part of that movement, and this is part of the Spirit being poured out on all flesh, as spoken about in Joel chapter 2.
And in Revelation 11:6, concerning the two witnesses, it says, these have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. And as we were talking about in the Gates of Enoch, and also here tonight, that the understanding of the times is related to waging spiritual warfare at a higher level, knowing when the gates are open at God's specific times, as it says in Ezekiel 46, 1 and 9, and also knowing how to combat the dark world in their times. And the two witnesses who I believe will be Enoch and Melchizedek, that they will have learned this lesson. And the two witnesses are more than just two individuals. They're true groups of people. And this is a 10 to 1 too much to, or 5 to 1 too much to go into, but on our YouTube channel, we have a teaching on the two witnesses for those that want more. And also, I think, I apologize, Donna's can give us a link in our archives. We've done several teaching on the blood moons, but I think if I'd tackle it at 5 to 1, I'd probably start a new doctrine here. So I'm not going to dream. I don't start the new doctrines, Brother Hall. You know what I'm saying?
Coffee's
There you
good.
go. Hey, and my coffee is still just right. It's
Mine too. Mine too.
3-hour show, and it's just now getting good sipping temperature.
Mine's good to go.
Right.
Well, let's get into that, David, and let's go to 4 a.m. in the morning, shall we?
Oh, man. Now, we ain't like some of those folks we could name that won't, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, don't get me started.
You guys are going to have to wake me up when this is over with. Send me a text or something so I can stop the show. I'm laying back right here, just trying not to fall asleep. But this is,
I guess if we're putting everybody to sleep, I guess we better shut her down.
No. We got questions.
I've been tired. I've been tired all day though. So you guys aren't putting me to sleep. I would be asleep hours ago if it weren't for this show. But I'm listening. Just don't expect me to say too much right now.
I'm getting to that point too. I'm already dodging questions now because I'm fading fast. So.
Well, I'm going to hit the ones that you've touched. You both have touched on a lot of these questions, and I want to hit the ones that you haven't. And I'm going to answer Chad's question. Was Passover meant for the Israelites or for the people of today? It's meant for us today. Yeshua is our Passover lamb, and absolutely, it's important.
A or B, but both A and B.
Yeah, it's very important. Let's see here. What year is it really? What year are we in really? This one comes from DZ. What year are we in? Well, we all know, the Gregorian calendar, we just hit 2017, but what year are we really in?
According to the Hebrew, and I have this on my calendar, it's the year 5777. Now, whether that's true or not, because I believe we're at the end of days as far as these 6,000 years, the 120 Jubilees. And so, in my opinion, we're somewhere near the end of the 6,000 years. And that, that we're the last generation. But that's my opinion. But according to the Hebrew calendar, we're in the year 5777.
Okay. Well, since you guys have touched on many of them, this last question, and I appreciate that this was posted last because it's a really good question. Can you ask Zen? 119 Ministries tested the Enochian calendar in short to this person's knowledge based on the 360-day-a-year cycle, and now we are in a 365-day-a-year cycle. So we use this calendar. Thus, all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Genesis 5:23. So Enoch was used then and may be applied in the millennium, new moon to new moon, from Sabbath to Sabbath. Does that make sense to you? Have you looked at the 119 Ministries testing of the Enochian calendar?
No, I don't even know what 119 Ministries is.
I would highly ask you to take a look at that just to see what you think. Okay,
but as far as the 365-day year, it's surprising. I don't know exactly how many days are in the year now, and I want to do a determination of this because I think that the only way we can correctly study that is by determining the way that the sun moves back and forth across the sky. Because according to Enoch, and also according to Jubilees, the year is established as 364 days, and that the sun takes 30 days to move through each gate. It takes 6 months to move back and forth between the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn, that each season has 90 days. And then we have 4 special days, which are the equinoxes and solstices. And God says in Jubilee 6 that the year will be established as 364 days, and it would not change. And those that change it, that's when the year and the timing and everything would get lost. So in my mind, if God establishes the 364 days, and the book of Enoch talks about it as being 364 days, well, why is it that we celebrate a 365 and a quarter day year? And if God would not want that to change, why would he establish or slow the sun down and cause it? That all does not make sense to me. And so I'm not positive that it is 365 days. And I think that determination, it can only be made by really studying and calculating the way that the sun moves and when it reverses its courses. Because the only time we can really affirm when these actual winter solstices and equinoxes and the summer solstice occur, in studying that, then we can really determine the length of the year. But until somebody does that with precision, we don't know how many days there are, whether it's 364 or 365. Somebody would have to really do an in-depth study on that to determine that with any kind of certainty. And I certainly don't have the skill set to do that.
Very good. I'm going to bring Jon Pounders back if you're still there and awake, brother.
I'm here and awake.
This, I tell you what, this has been definitely a David Carrico midnight ride.
The last thing well, maybe not the last thing. It's just, this is just one of these shows where you can't shut up. But I think if they would give Oscars or Emmys, and here we're talking worldly, I'll just say, if they would give awards for promos, I just love the heading John did for the show tonight. I mean, isn't that great? I mean, that is just so cool. I just love that.
Oh, you mean the Enoch? Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, you do awesome work, John. I mean, you could really be a hired graphic artist person for sure.
Thanks.
I mean,
somebody
really
messaged me the other day about they're coming out with a series of books and they wanted me to do the artwork for them. And I think I'm going to do it, even though I don't know how much time I have to do it, but they're sending me a book so I can check it out and see if I want to
awesome.
do it. But, I mean, I'd love to do that, but to be quite, I mean, I would do it for friends and stuff, but as far as like doing it for a living or whatnot, I just, man, I don't have the patience for it all. I you know, it's one of those things I like doing, but at the same token, it's not, you know how it is, man. When you get your mindset on something, it's like, it's just another
That would be like me doing Facebook or Zen doing slides. It'd be one of those.
Right.
Well, yeah, this has been a great show, and I'm going to go back and probably listen to it again and do some more research myself. Definitely would love to have you for a conference sometime. We're going to try to do more conferences, just try to bust them out and get them done, because I think
now that would be on the condition he makes slides. That's condition.
Yeah, give me a lot of time.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be getting the slides together. Maybe you can find somebody to help you do that as well, because that is a pain, and I definitely know where you're coming from on that. I got so much to do before we bust out this new subscription-based channel. I got so many things to edit, 2 documentaries we're going to be working on, and a series of shows and stuff. So, and then the conferences, 2 conferences coming up, 3 actually, if you count the one in Texas. It's going to be crazy stuff, but I enjoy it, every minute of it. So,
Awesome.
but yeah, I just want to say thank you, Zen. Thank you, David. Thank you, John. It's always a blessing to talk with you guys and to be able to call you guys friends. And I just want to say thank you to you guys for just trying to figure out the truth along with us. And it's a blessing to have friends that care about that kind of thing, because as most of us know, we're out in the world and there's not a lot of people that are really trying to find out the truth about matters. They really don't care. They're more concerned with Mariah Carey's dress tonight than they are
Right.
with what's really going on in the world. So anyways, I just want to say thank you. Make sure you guys sub Zen's channel. He has a YouTube channel. Check him out on True Frequency Radio, Fallen Angels TV. Is that it? FallenAngels.tv. Is that right?
Yeah, fallenangels.tv and on YouTube, Endeavor Freedom and Zen Garcia. And last thing, as far as comment, I am no expert on all of these things. Yes, I've written about them. Yes, I've studied them. And yes, I've brought them out. But I am learning just like everybody else. And so we are learning together. I am no professional, no expert. These are, it's been 2 years that I've learned about flat Earth and the calendar system. So all this is still new to me too. And I'm learning every day more, just like everybody else. So.
Amen. That's the way we all should be, because I mean, if once a person thinks they're an expert on the subject, I think that they just kind of stop learning at that point, because, once you feel like you're an expert, you have nothing else to learn. So we're definitely not at that point yet. And I don't think I'll ever get there. I mean, to be quite honest with you, a lot of this is way over my head. So I'll probably leave it there for a while. And but I am going to study this out and really look into it. But just thank you guys for listening so much. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'm not sure they still have the bell thing. Somebody said that they couldn't find the bell, and maybe it's because they've already hit it. But if you haven't hit the bell right by the sub button, hit it, because that's going to make sure you guys continue to get notifications that we're going live. Go to Facebook. We don't use Twitter as much. We still use Twitter. It shares stuff on there, but since they censored some of our last stuff, we haven't used them as much. But we do have a Facebook, and it's growing pretty rapidly. I mean, it's been kind of crazy how fast it's growing. So follow us on there in case something were to happen. We drop off YouTube. You never know what might happen. The more truth gets out, the more they hate it. So just make sure to figure out the best way. David has a show tomorrow at 10 o'clock on FLJC Radio. You can check that out. Make sure you guys go check it out. He always does really fantastic shows. And David, we could just go the show all the way until you have your show.
I think about and in the morning, I am doing my first ever flat Earth sermon.
Awesome.
And I don't plan on repenting of it anytime soon. So I'm thrilled about that. And I'm just thrilled about everything the Lord has just been pouring. It's exciting. And I'm just thank you to John and John and all of our listeners. And at the Hanukkah party, something Donna said on the way home, she says, I really feel like I've been around a bunch of people that really love God. And that's the way we feel about you guys and all the Now You See TV listeners, and about Zen. And I tell you, Zen give us just what we expect from Zen when we bring him on. And I'm going to listen to this again, all 3 hours plus of it. So Zen, thank you so much. It's been a great night.
My honor. Thank you guys. It's been a blessing to fellowship with you. And what better way to bring in the new year?
No doubt. Yeah.
It ain't the new year.
Yeah, according to the Gregorian, anyways.
Yeah. And what David said too about the Hanukkah party, I felt the same way. Man, almost everybody that was there traveled over an hour to get there. And these are all people I consider, friends from local kind of areas. I mean, even you, David, traveled at least an hour to get to my house. I live out in the middle of nowhere, but people were there hungry to fellowship, hungry to have a good time. And it was awesome. I mean, it was such a good thing to do. It's crazy how far people will travel to really just get that in, and that's good. I mean, it's a good thing, because it's not easy to find. It's not easy to find those kind of people, but we have a bunch of them here on Now You See TV, and I would urge you guys to eventually try to get into our private chat, add these people on Facebook, because you can all look at their Facebook here on the private chat, so you can add them on there, get to know people, because you'll be surprised how many people in your area. I did on Facebook, on my own personal page, I did a video talking about. And I'm going to end this quick, I promise. I'm not going to go into a long thing about it, but I did a video about what it was like a year ago, or 2 years ago, even a year ago, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I didn't know anybody anywhere around. It was me and my friend Daniel Hatt that lived down the road, and we kind of met up at a gun auction. We were buying some guns at this gun auction, and we started talking, and we realized we had this in common, Torah observance. And from then on, for over a year, there was nobody in the area. And if there was, we didn't know about them. But the more we kind of kept connecting with people through Now You See TV and through all that stuff, we started finding people that were like all around. I mean, and the people that I invited, this weren't just You know, it's not like I said, hey, now you see TV, people come to my, you know, party. It was people that I knew through people that I knew. I invited, like, you know, kind of different people. I think there was, you know, some people invited their friends and stuff. So it wasn't like it was like we put the word out, but like 50 people showed up that were really hungry in that stuff. So it's growing. It's crazy how many people can do it. So make sure you guys connect with each other. Please do that on through here, because it's really cool how many people you'll find that might actually be in your area. And keep on keeping on, because I promise you it gets better. People, there's more and more people coming every day. I don't know how many emails that we get per month of people that are coming to the knowledge of the truth and just really taking the bull by the horns, I guess, so to speak, and really trying to learn the truth. There's more and more people every day. More, I mean, just hundreds, and I would say hundreds a month email me, and there's probably for every 100 people, there's thousands of people that are doing the same thing. So on other channels and other things like that. So there's so many people coming to it. But anyways, high five, guys. Shalom, and we will see you guys next time.
Shalom.